Good morning, and welcome everybody to our last workshop with our superintendent, Ms. Saunders. I'm sure you're maybe a little bittersweet, but more sweet than bitter, I'm sure, for you.
Absolutely.
We got a good list of items today. First one will be Ms. Rinaldi, if you want to come on up. Update on the impact fee study, and floor is yours. Thanks.
Sounds good. Good morning, Board Chair, Vice Chair, Board members, and Ms. Saunders, Superintendent Saunders. I'm going to kind of give you a brief overview of what's happened since the March 3rd workshop where we first presented to you the impact fees study. To frame what the next steps are, is our goal today is to develop our resolution that we will be presenting to you at a subsequent board meeting for approval. And then that resolution will go to the county for their approval as well. The elements that we want to focus on today are taking a look at the impact fee amounts, the way we've structured it with tiers, as well as some direction on some recommendations and thoughts that we have on workforce housing, affordable housing as well. So that's kind of our goal today, and that'll allow us to put our resolution together with Mr. Dye so that we can bring that before you hopefully sometime in July, if not the 1st of August. What's happened since March 3rd, which was at the workshop, is we have had 2 public meetings. We had one on April 26th and one on May 30th. And we had a nice turnout for them. I want to give you a list of who actually participated. We did notice those the way we do typically for these type of meetings. We had a group of school principals at all levels, elementary, middle, and high, and typically there were principals that were in high growth areas so that they could share with the community the challenges that they have relative to capacity. We had representatives from the Chamber of Commerce, Manatee Schools Parent Task Force, Affordable Housing Advisory Board, the Home Builders Association, and we also had participation by private developers, Schroeder Manatee Ranch, SMR, Neal Communities, Faulkner Group, and the Barrington Group attended these sessions as well. And we also had support from Manatee government as well, their planning department that oversees the impact fees. And of course, we had the public, and we had some public comments, and we had a school board member attend as well. So, I mean, they were good work sessions. We went through the details that we went through with you on March 3rd with them, and we received their feedback. There were 2 major issues that came up in this committee. The first was the structure of our service areas. Our impact fees right now are county-wide, and we're proposing that they remain county-wide. The Manatee County government does things a little differently. They have county-wide impact fees the way we do for parks, law enforcement, public safety, and libraries. So they're similar to us. Their transportation, or they call it their multimodal transportation, presently is done in 4 quadrants. But we've recently reviewed their update for their impact fees, and it appears that they're going to go to countywide as well. So at that point, both agencies will be in the same type of methodology, countywide. Now, that's important for us with the realization that last year alone, 18.2% of our students did not attend their zone school. So we are a district of choice. So any construction, any new campuses, any additions that we do not really benefit just that one pocket, but really benefit everybody district-wide. So that's one of the reasons that we believe that going and maintaining a district-wide impact fee is the correct way to go. The second major issue was workforce housing and affordable housing. And I'm going to hold the comments and recommendations for that until after we do the full presentation so we can show you an idea of some of the discounts that we're representing or some of the ideas that we have in regard regards to workforce and affordable housing. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to Carson Bice that will go through the updated study. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. It's good to see you again. I'm going to walk you through an abbreviated presentation. You've seen a lot of this before. To introduce us, we're Tischler Bice. We've done more impact fees than anybody in the country, and you can see here we've done quite a bit of work in the state of Florida relative to school impact fees. If you remember from some of our previous work sessions, there's really 3 requirements legally for impact fees. One is we have to show nexus or need, and that's done through the study where we show that growth has happened in the county, that growth is going to continue in the school district, and these new students are going to generate the need for additional infrastructure. We also have to show proportionality, and that's why you see school impact fees done by either type of house, single family or multifamily, or by size of house as we're proposing in this update. And then we also have to show benefit, and we show benefit through the timing of the expenditures as well as geographic benefit. And as Mr. Rinaldi said or mentioned, you are a district that has school choice. 18% of your students do attend schools outside of their zone, and so we think a countywide service area is appropriate for the school impact fee. The methodology we've chosen, and this is pretty standard for school impact fees across Florida, is what we call an incremental expansion or consumption-based approach. It's formulaic in terms of we define what it is to build a student station, so to speak, how many square feet that is per student, how much land there is per student, how many buses there are per student, and then we get that cost to replicate that infrastructure in today's dollars. As we've discussed at previous meetings, there were some recent legislative changes to the state's Impact Fee Act. The major one is that we're limited to the amount of increases. If you increase the fee less than 25%, it has to be done in 2 equal annual increments. An increase between 25 and 50% has to be done in 4 equal annual increments. We can't update the fees for a minimum of 4 years. You can update the fee, or excuse me, you can increase the fee more than 50% if you do what we call a finding or demonstrating extraordinary circumstances. And you have to notice 2 public meetings, and the increase must be approved by at least 2/3 vote of the governing body. So this slide here summarizes what we call the demand indicators, and in this case, it's students, number of school-age children by size of unit. And you can see here that we have 6 bands, so to speak, of sizes. There's 750 square feet or less, 751 to 1,000, 1,000 to 1,300, 13 to 1,700, 17 to 2,200, and then houses greater than 2,200 square feet. As you can see here, for all school types, elementary, middle, and high school, as the size increases, so do the number of school-age children, and then the total is shown on the far right. This slide here summarizes all of the level of service standards that we've gone over in previous meetings. In terms of as we work our way from the top of the table down, we showed the school building cost per student, the land cost per student, the bus cost per student, and from that we get what we call a gross capital cost per student. And from that, we deduct 3 credits. As you remember from previous meetings, one of the tenets of impact fees is we have to guard against new development paying twice, once through the impact fee and again through other streams of revenue. And so the fee has been discounted for future principal payments on existing certificates of participation, the sales tax bond issues, as well as future debt that would be issued on new schools to get that net cost per student, which ranges from almost $36,000 for an elementary school student, about $46,600 for a middle school student, and about $46,250 for a high school student. This slide here summarizes the proposed fees. As we work our way from the top to the bottom of the table, we have that net cost per student summarized at the top. The middle part of the table shows those student generation rates we spoke about earlier. And then we have the proposed fees, and this table can be a little bit confusing because of the new statutory limits. But as we work our way left to right, You see the maximum supportable fee shown for the different size bands. We show that compared to your current impact fee, and then what the statutory limit is. So the maximum supportable in the case of a unit 750 square feet or less is actually $4,504. However, statutorily, if we go with the 50% or less, or 25% or less standard, the proposed fees are $2,957, which is an increase of $986. And you can see these proposed increases on the table. And then we show here the proposed phasing. We show the current fees, what they would be in year 1, year 2, year 3, and year 4 under the 50% or less increase. And finally, everybody wants to know, once you're done with the fee study, well, where do we stand relative to other school districts within the state? And as you can see here, your current fee is in the bottom 50%. Your proposed fee isn't that much higher than your current fee on average. And it puts you, again, basically at the 50% level, meaning that about half the school districts that have impact fees have fees that are higher than yours. For instance, Osceola County has traditionally had the highest school impact fees in the state, and they're $12,373. The average single-family house would pay a fee in Manatee County under the proposed structure of $7,055. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
We'll just go around the dais. So, Ms. Messenger, you have any questions?
I don't. You've been here several times giving us lots of information, so I just appreciate your time and your work. Thank you.
Ms. Spray?
No, it's a lot of information to digest real quickly here, but I've looked at this too, and I don't see anything that has stood out that's different from all the other conversations that we've had in the past, so.
I just have one question.
Sure.
And that is the determination of the capital cost per student. Middle and high school actually high school is less than middle school. Do we take into account, the costs of a high school to have the athletic facilities, the extra land, the turf, the billboards, wouldn't that drive it up more than middle?
Yeah, so good question, and I wish Mike was here to help me out on this, but as I remember it, at the high school level, the capital costs we're using include some just additions, which sort of artificially decreases that average cost. If the county was going to build nothing but brand new high schools, then that cost would be higher.
Because this is only taking into account the next 4, so it doesn't really count theoretically the new school that may. Gotcha.
Right, the new school is actually happening in year 4, but
Right.
keep in mind that we have to draw a line in the sand as to where we're going to start the calculations in order to start this. So really, I believe this data is probably 2021 data, if not
22 costs.
22 costs. So we didn't even have that on the 5-year plan at that point. Yeah. So.
I'm sorry, you get it, but I don't.
So it's because, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, because the additions that we're doing at the high schools, like Southeast, we're doing the science edition. Right. Lakewood Ranch, we're doing that edition.
Oh, okay.
Now we've got so those were the costs that we utilized in order to come up with a cost per student stations for the high schools. Now, if we do this 4 years from now, we're going to have the brand new high school at $150 million. So you are probably going to see that high school costs come up significantly as opposed to just the additions that we're doing right now.
So we don't charge impact fees for anticipated.
We drew the line in the sand on where we were going to identify where our capacity projects were, and the high school was not in consideration at that point. It wasn't in the 5 years at that point.
This only goes 4 years out.
Yeah, it goes 4 years now.
Should we come back early to evaluate?
Yes, I mean, we very well could. I mean, the only requirement now is that we do it every 4 years.
Right.
But we can do it sooner.
No, you couldn't adopt
Yeah.
it sooner.
Right.
2 or 4,
$150 million, that's a lot.
It's,
yeah.
Yeah, but I'd also like to point out, sometimes,
Can we just verify what
Sure.
was just said about the 4 years? You're saying she asked, can we come back within the next 4 years and adopt a new one? You're saying we cannot.
you would have to wait 4 years before you embarked on it.
You'd have to wait till
do it
that
on that
next
fourth
one,
year.
and then, okay.
But we could do the study,
we could start the.
Yeah, you could start to study, so that way you don't rise to school.
because right now we're pretty far
Yeah,
out from
yeah.
the last study, but,
Were you done? I'm sorry.
yeah, I am.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr.
question,
Tatum,
man.
or did you have something to
I
add?
know, it's
Okay,
not important.
Mr. Tatum.
Good morning, sir.
Morning.
May we please go to page number 6, which is the student generation rates unit size. So I just want to make sure I understand what these numbers mean. So if you look, what they mean is for a given square foot range, the estimate is that, like for instance, on the elementary school, if the bottom line 2,201 square feet or more, a house of that size will generate 0.113 students. Is that what we're trying to say?
Yeah, another way to think about it is for every 100 homes that are that size, you generate approximately 11 students.
11 students, okay. I get it, okay. All right. So those numbers just seem kind of low to me, but you guys are the experts at this. I would think that houses of that size are generally family homes, but that's like so you said 11 students per 100 homes. That's only one school student per 10 homes approximately, or?
Yeah, I think the better way to look at it is to look at the total.
Okay.
So if you go over to the right-hand side,
All that.
the larger home would generate 26 students for every 100 homes.
Okay.
That's a fairly standard, or that rate is in keeping with what we normally find in a situation like the county has, where you have a lot of retirees. It's not like suburban Maryland, where I live, where the student generation rate would probably be 0.6.
Yeah, okay.
So this is pretty reflective of what we see. And remember, it's also the life of the home too. So we're looking at all the school-aged students and your universe of housing units. So we just don't look at new subdivisions that are coming in, because you've got to basically assume a 20-year life.
Okay. It just seemed a little low, 0.262 students. So like you said, out of 100, that means 100 homes, about a quarter of them will produce either an elementary, middle, or high school student, but
That go to a public school.
they go to a public school. They go to a public school, so somehow that's,
Charter schools aren't in here, private schools.
okay. You guys are, I mean, you've done this before. I don't know anything in the sense of if that's what your analysis shows, and you think it's mostly because there's a large retiree population that comes down here. And okay, great, thank you. Then moving to page number 8, please. So the maximums, can you explain the legal definition of the maximum supportable impact fee per housing unit?
Yeah, based on the demographics of the county, the cost factors that we're using, the existing levels of service, that's the highest fee you can legally justify.
And you mentioned that a couple pages back, right? But then we can't, not that we'd necessarily want to, but I mean, we can't do that because of statutory requirements about 50%.
Yeah, you'd have to
or number of
demonstrate
years.
the extraordinary circumstances.
Extraordinary circumstances. Okay, great. Thank you. And then could we move to page number 10, please, which is single-family fee comparison. I am struck by the fact that Sarasota County only charges $2,286, and we're like over 3 times higher, which I'm sure there's a reason for that, but could you expound upon why because to me it's kind of similar. I guess we have a little different demographics, but go ahead.
Right. Well, they've historically had a very low impact fee.
Okay.
And in this new, the changes to the impact fee have sort of hamstrung those jurisdictions that have historically had a low fee, because they're not able to increase it. In fact, we did Flagler County School District fee 2 years ago, and they hadn't updated the fee since 2006. And when they did the fee in 2006, they only adopted like 25% of what it should be
Okay.
at the time. And they're the only folks I know that have gone through the extraordinary circumstances provision.
Okay. So how do they, and again, sometimes I ask questions because I'm thinking about what will constituents ask me, and they'll say, well, down in Sarasota County, they got, it's 3 times less down there. So how have they, because it's one of the top school districts in the country, and they seem to have good schools down there, how have they been able to, and I don't know if this is a question for you, or maybe even you, Ms. Saunders, how are they able to build adequate, nice schools and have a very good school system with impact fees that are 3 times less than ours? And
A couple of things I'll put into account. First of all, their student growth population is not like ours. So our student population is larger. Their tax base is higher.
Okay.
They just recently passed a half-cent sales tax, where we've had that for a number of years. They have not. So they do have other funding sources because of their tax base, but they are starting to make changes to replicate what we're doing, because they are starting to see some growth. They are having to build additional schools. And therefore, I would suspect their impact fees will slowly be changing up as well. But in this last election cycle, I think after we did our millage tax, they did the half-cent sales tax. So they now are bringing in additional revenues as well.
okay. So it's,
Those are my,
Superintendent is exactly right. We did the Sarasota fee last year.
Okay.
And to her point, they have not had to build the schools in the manner that you have. And they are starting to see growth in student enrollments tick up. So they will have to build more schools than they have in the past.
okay, so basically, it sounds like the primary issue is that school growth or student growth is not as great as it is in Manatee County, ergo you need less schools, ergo you don't need as much capital funding through impact fees to build new schools. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, great, that's all the questions I have. Thank you, sir.
Can I come in?
One thing.
Sure.
Just that they still get 1.5 mils for capital, just like we do, but their tax base is significantly higher and they have less students.
Okay.
So not only can their impact fee forward probably have to been lower because they still have the 1.5 mils, but that brings in a lot more for them with a lot less kids.
Okay.
I just wanted to point that out.
So when you say the tax base, you're talking about the value, the total value of property?
Yes,
Added all together, that it's higher down in Sarasota? So when you
Yes.
take 1.015 times a bigger number, you get more money?
yes,
Why you should
but
pay
less
attention.
students,
Not less students? Okay.
right.
And I'd say too, over the course of Northport is their newest high school, meaning they had to build because of growth. Northport would be theirs. That's only their 5th high school in their county. We've got 7, right? So just with that alone, you can tell, like, and they have not had that growth east of the interstate like we have. They're a little bit different. They're elongated. We're not, but just looking at the high schools, like they haven't built a new high school, and gosh, Northport's got to be 15 years old.
and we will be building another one within
Right.
3 years.
Right.
So
So that you
our,
can tell the growth is just a little bit different. Yeah.
Mr. Ch-
This
yeah.
Sprague, you had something?
Yeah, brings up a question that you had said that you met with all of the key players of building. And to me, I think it's underestimated for how many students based on what's coming here. What you said that the .26, was it?
0.62 or
Right, right, students. The demographics are not, in my opinion, you're the expert, but in my opinion, the houses that we are building, we're actually building for families, not retirees, as stated. I think there are a number of retirees that are staying instead of going back to their winter home. So I'm like, okay, why is this based on seniors when you're saying seniors are moving down,
based
but
on seniors.
or retirees, I guess?
Based on, no, what I meant was you have a large proportion relative to the average county in the United States. And this is based on your actual enrollment in your schools from last year compared to the housing units that are currently in the county. Now, to your point, we may find in 4 years, if we do this again, that, to your point, there is a larger influx of families, and if that's the case, then that student generation rate will increase. But we're kind of hamstrung, not only legally, but through the State Impact Fee Act here, which says you have to use the most recent and localized data. So we can't speculate on what a student generation rate may be 4 years from now, or use data from what we think is a comparable county. We have to use data from the school district, and that's frankly what your demographics show here.
Okay, and this is taking into account our projected for this 23-24. I think you allocated like 1,200 more students.
Correct.
For that year, so this data reflects that as well, correct?
Reflects
No.
last year,
Just last
Right.
year's, meaning 23,
it's the past school year.
okay, 22-23, but it's not taking account for the 23-24 growth of 1,200 more students.
Right.
So we just have to, okay.
Right, we have to draw a line at some point.
That's kinda
where this
hard.
is the data's coming from, right?
But the state dictates that, correct?
Yeah, I mean,
Yes,
you have to
the
use.
state does that, right, okay. Wow, okay, that's all I had, I just wanted to clarify that.
Couple questions, did I just for clarification purposes. So one was what Ms. Foreman asked about the difference in high school. So I understand we're building new elementary middles. We're just adding pieces in high school. So I do get that now. Looking at page 8 with the impact fees per housing unit down at the bottom. When you say statutory limit, that's the highest we can do, or is that the lowest we can do?
No, that's the highest if you increase it 50%.
Gotcha. And so that's when you look over to the right, it says we did increase it 50%, 50% on 751 to 1,000, only 15, only 37. Is there a reason why, and maybe I can go back up and look at the data, is the reason why we're only impacting 15 and 37%, everything else is 50? Because they produce the most, they don't produce the most kids. What's the reasoning? Is that to help affordable housing?
It's because if you notice, under your current fees, we're going from a one-size-fits-all, single-family and multifamily.
That's right, we broke it up.
To the bands of size, and so.
Some didn't have to move as much.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
yeah, because at first blush, you say, why isn't everything 50%,
Gotcha.
right?
But that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then the phasing, that's second, the next page, page 9, next year it'll move to 22-18, then the next year 24. So we won't actually get to that 29 until 4 years later.
Right.
Okay. Now, you mentioned something, and this maybe opened up a can of worms.
It's okay.
I don't know. So you talked about charter schools. So, and maybe this is new because obviously it just came out in the last session. But now that we have to give some capital funding to charter schools, and I know that's not through impact fees, but we are losing capital money to give to charter schools, and we've never had to do that before. Have you seen in any of your, and granted this is brand new, so I guess we don't have an answer to this. We don't know how much we're going to give to charter schools yet for next year, right?
Right.
We can look at this year's data and say, oh, we're going to give X amount of dollars, based on this year's data. Is this study taking into effect that we are losing some capital money from that, or no?
Not at this point.
Okay. My question to Mr. Ronald, should we? Because I just don't know, we don't know the impact of what that's going to look like.
But we are already giving the charter schools some of the sales tax.
Right.
So that is taken into consideration.
Okay.
And it's our anticipation that as they get access to the 1.5 mil, it's going to balance out and we won't be giving them as much sales tax
Okay.
as well. So that is taken into
Okay, so if we do
consideration.
feel like that's going to be a wash, that's fine. Okay. I just wanted to make sure that, because we just don't know that impact until obviously we start giving money to the charter schools. Okay, thank you. Other than that, I'm good. I personally I liked how we're going instead of the one fee for every different, no matter what the size was. I like going to a tier based, so I'm happy with that. Yeah, that's good. Thank you for your work.
Can I ask one more?
Yeah, absolutely.
One more question, sir. Do you do county impact fee studies too, or do you do
Yeah.
school? So it seemed to me, I went and sat down with a builder and kind of went through their thoughts and opinions on this, and it seemed to me, in Manatee County, it's about $22,000 total dollars of impact fees. Does that number seem,
I don't know.
when you put the county and the school together and all the
surprise me.
impact, wouldn't surprise you though? Just as a point of interest, it does add a, chunk of change on top of a home, and for certain people, it's the difference between qualifying and not qualifying. I understand the need for it. It's an interesting point to.
Is that
understand.
but so to that point, like, is that? I mean, I guess you can't compare obviously everywhere on the country, but is that significantly higher than other You know what I mean? Now, granted, we're seeing the growth, so it's just different, right? But,
Well, I mean, that's a good question, and also a loaded question.
sure.
So first of all, Florida is one of the few states where school impact fees are common. And so school impact fees typically are one of the larger fees. Usually, utility-related fees are high, transportation can be high, and schools can be high. I can tell you that, like in the Front Range of Colorado, where we do a ton of work for all the cities up and down I-25, water and sewer can be upwards to $100,000 per house just for those fees. So, 22,000, in my opinion, I'm not trying to make it be flippant. It's nothing to sneeze at, but relative to a lot of communities, that's not a high impact fee. But for other communities, they would think that's high. So.
And there are some counties in Florida that actually don't have any impact fees.
Yeah.
I seem to remember at one of our finance conferences, they gave us a list, and I don't know how they get by, so to speak, but there's.
Well, it's interesting, and this is purely anecdotal. In South Carolina, the Impact Fee Act requires that you do an analysis of the effect of the fee on the availability of affordable housing, but they don't define what affordable housing is. They don't give any metrics for doing the analysis. They just say you have to do it. So we've done it a lot of different ways, but I just wanted to give you a flavor. We calculated a fee of $15,000 in a Clover School District, which is around Charlotte, just south of North Carolina border. And when you look at two scenarios, what the cost burden is, or what a mortgage is for a house without an impact fee versus with an impact fee, it moves the needle. Like, I think it was 1.7% on the mortgage. Because you think about it, you're taking that fee and you're then amortizing it over a 30-year period. And so, the mortgage went from, I'm just going to make numbers up, but it was like $1,328 to $1,390, right? So it wasn't like it was adding a significant amount to your monthly housing expense, but still, $22,000 is a lot of money.
And it does probably keep a certain small percentage of people from qualifying where maybe a lower impact fee would have allowed them to qualify. I understand. I'm just trying to get a good understanding of this whole process and why they're necessary. And because people will say, well, there are no impact fees in County X or County Y, and why are ours so high, and why is Sarasota 3 times less? And it's just good to have that information and understand the process.
To give you now, this is the Manatee County's present impact fee structure, and it includes our structure on homes from 1,000 square feet or less all the way up to 2,200. The range is 9,600 to 17,800. So that kind of gives you an idea, because they have tiered in previous studies like we're tiering right now, but the range was 9,600 to 17,800 is the general range of their fees presently.
All right. Thanks, Mr. Rinaldi. That's good to know.
So that was the county impact?
That's the county, including our fee.
Including
Our fee
ours.
is included.
Okay.
Our present fee is included in that.
Okay, so that would be school
The
and.
one-size-fits-all fee.
Okay, school and county, all right. Okay,
Now, the one issue that came up with our committee meetings was workforce and affordable housing. So I wanted to go through a couple of items we discussed with the group, a couple of things we've talked with the county, as well as some things that we've kind of brainstormed internally. The primary question obviously was the proposed impact fees. Can they be modified or adjusted in order to entice affordable housing projects? And one of the first things, there's really three factors there. The first factor is by doing the tiering that we're proposing right now, you can see that the 750 or less, which would typically be a workforce or affordable housing unit, that it's being, it's definitely the smallest. If it was a single family house, we would be charging $6,100 for it. We now are charging $2,200 for it. When you look at the 1,971 that we identified as the current fee, that's a mobile home fee. So, but we needed to identify that somewhere in the chart, so we did it at the lower extreme. So if they were building a single family home that was a small home at 75 or 750 square feet, they would be paying the full 6,127 right now. Where with our revised fee, it's going to start in year one at 2,200, and then by year four it'll be at 2,900. So we feel that the tiering really helps the affordable housing sector. The second thing is that we do charge any developer that comes in, because we do have concurrency, we charge them a fee to give them a school assessment, and then when they get their final site plan, a site plan assessment. And that initial school assessment is $600, and the site plan assessment is $850. One of the things we talked about was perhaps waiving those fees for a workforce affordable housing development, if they came in and they qualified for that. So it would be a small loss, but it would be, moving in the right direction to help them in any way that we could. And then the third thing is actually looking at discounting the fees that we have right now. Right now, Manatee County has a process for identifying which developments qualify as workforce or affordable housing. It's called, they do a submittal and they enter an agreement. It's called a LURA agreement, which is a land use restriction agreement. So it restricts that developer to developing whatever percentage of the developer's development dedicated for affordable housing. Right now, that LURA process, the county shared the data with us so that we could do some data mining and identify what type of impact there would be. But in 2022, there were a total of 1,545 development units that were submitted as LURAs. Of those, 987, or about 65%, were dedicated for workforce and affordable housing. So the good thing for us is we're not in the affordable housing business. The county already has a process in place that we can tag onto. If they recognize it as a qualifying affordable housing project, then we will perhaps give them a discount based on our discussions today. But so we won't be doing that assessment. The county would be doing that assessment. And they look at everything, the AMI, the average rate of salaries, and they're also terms, and they range from 50 to 50 years that they would have those units dedicated for affordable housing. So they've already done a lot of the heavy lifting to support what we would do. And we took a look with the data that was provided, and we recognized it was kind of partial data and we had to work closely with the county on. We looked at perhaps a discount of 25, 35, or 50% of our impact fees. So keeping in mind, more than likely, those impact fees are going to be in the 1,000 square foot or less. So they're going to range anywhere from 2,900 to 5,200 by the time we get to year 4. What we estimate over the next 4 years is we'll have total collections of around $140.5 million for impact fees, roughly $35 million a year. So that's an upkeep right now. We're in that 29 to 30 million, but you can see that we are bumping it up with this new assessment, which is appropriate the way construction costs are going. So keeping that in mind, so with a 25% discount, we would see our collections reduced by 7.7 million over those 4 years, which is roughly 5.5%. So that's for a 25% reduction. If we do a 35% reduction, then at that point it would be 10.9 million, around, which brings us around 7.7% of our total collections for the 4 years. If we do the full 50%, it's over 15 million, it's 15.5 million, and at that point, it's an 11%. So looking at what we anticipate for our costs and all, we as staff would recommend that maybe we fall in that 35% range, which would, we would lose or we would forego collections of around 10.9 million. But on top of that, teacher housing, workforce housing, we feel that maybe that's a good incentive for those developments to come along. So those were the 3 items that we looked at. We were already looking at the tiers. The second item is that we waive our fees for the review of their process during concurrency. And the third is that we give a reduction. If they sign a LURA agreement with the county, then we would give them perhaps 35% off their fees. So that's kind of what we would be proposing for affordable housing to help the community.
Okay.
Ms. Fessner?
It sounded as if you were hoping to get like a consensus from the board on those things you just stated, and I support them. I just want you to know.
Okay. Yeah. Well, it would be part of the resolution that we put together, and the board would approve it.
I don't want to have a debate that night on whether that should be in the resolution or not. So I'm letting you know right now, I would support those things. I think that they are appropriate, and I think that, like you said, I think that'll help. If it can help attract making housing a little less expensive so that we can have more teachers, bus drivers, cafeteria workers, anyone else, then I'll support that. So, thank you.
Okay, I guess I'm next.
Yeah, we'll just go around the circle.
Okay. So, you're saying when the county does a discount, which is called a LURA, and you called that a land use rural agreement?
I don't know if the county is doing it. I'm not sure what the structure of their discount is at this point right now, and we really didn't delve into that. So,
and how
but
they do that?
Sign the but they do establish an agreement. So there must be some type of discount happening, but we really didn't mind what their thoughts were.
So we didn't know what their actual kind of vetting process would be then, you would say?
Well, no, yeah. Well, we do know that they evaluate the AMI, which is the salary level relative
Right.
to 120%. We do know that most of what we saw range from anywhere from 15 to 50 years for the actual
Right.
term of it. And then at that point, we haven't been involved in that process since it's the first time we've looked at it.
Okay, so they determine with the developer or whomever's building all these houses, there's a percent that would be deemed as workforce housing.
Exactly.
And then we kind of adopt that level
Process.
of what they deem affordable, and we just kind of tail onto their agreement then, is that what you're
I
saying?
wouldn't tie us into the percentage that they're offering and all that. What I would tie us into is the process.
Right,
If a developer says, I've got a LURA agreement, then we
Follow their lead.
we follow their lead. That's what I want to make sure, because again, if a constituent comes to me and say, hey, what about the affordable or workforce housing? That is basically determined by the county, and the district actually just kind of follows their lead.
Yep, exactly.
So, and the county, I guess they talked with the developer how many units per community they build that are going to be tagged for that 50-year
Yep.
length of time as affordable or workforce housing. Okay, and
We saw in the data that was provided that there were some developments that it was 100%, and there were some developments that it was 30%. It averaged out about 60% of the developments had an affordable housing component.
okay,
So maybe dedicated units, it may,
that's a pretty good number. I like hearing that because it is getting almost too expensive to work here and live here, and that's what we gotta kind of balance out. I mean, the cost of housing is so expensive. All right, so that was my whole thing. I wanted to make sure that we're following the county's lead. So if there's any questions on that, we could actually go to the county meeting and say, hey, how are you deeming that, and watch the, okay. I just want to make sure that myself and well as the public knows that that's the process that we follow. Okay,
Well, we can say,
Miss-
it's not us, it's the
we can
county.
blame it on them, right?
Ms. Saunders had something to.
We really wanted, I really wanted to have it very clear in there how so that it was not subjective. Because as it was now, they could appeal to the superintendent. We really do not want to get into the business of deciding that this one meets
No.
some definition so, that we felt was the best way to go about it. It's not subjective. There's very criteria. You meet it over here, then we're gonna honor it. There's no debate. Either you do or you don't. And, probably out of the whole thing for me, I know that's very important for everyone. We needed to have something very clear in there. And I think this is the very best path moving forward so that the community knows we do have a stipulation for affordable housing, and this is the criteria. It's not subjective.
And this is all gonna go into the form of a resolution that we're gonna propose to the county.
for our impact.
If I remember following that before.
And the board would vote on it, and then it goes to
And then it
the-
goes to the county. Okay, that's what I wanted to make clear, that that's the process. Okay.
I just wanted to ask about the second thing you talked about, the fees. Are you going to propose that we waive fees altogether for those?
Just for, if a developer comes to us and they have a LoRa, then we would waive those review fees that we typically charge that developer. It's, it's a small piece, but, it's $1,500, which by year 4, that's half of a housing unit credit that they get. So, but, it's probably in the right direction.
Yeah, okay. And we charge the same fee no matter how many homes are going in that development?
Yeah, we do.
Should we consider changing that?
We could look at that. That's more of our interlocal agreement and all that. But yeah, we could look at that process.
Yeah, seems like for a tiny development to pay the same as North River Ranch, so. Okay.
Yeah.
That's it.
Mr. Tatum?
Ms. Saunders, you mentioned that right now you have the authority to do some waiving of impact fees, is that right? And you'd like to do away with all of that? Is that what this will do?
Yes and no. We have our own criteria, but it's not very clear. I do waive if it's a 55-year or older development, because no children are going to make up those housing. But I know it's been, and that's how it's been for years, but affordable housing has not been as big of a focal need as it is now. So I just feel like we really do need to have very clear guidelines so everyone knows if you fall into this category, this is what the result is. And it's not subjective for our developer. Those appeals go to the board attorney, it comes to me. It should be clearly defined, and so they're putting a clearly defined affordable housing in that resolution.
And it may be fairly costly to the developer as well, because what the developer typically has to do is do an alternative impact fee, and they need to hire a consultant similar to our consultant, and they need to, mine the data. I mean, so it's not just, I'd like a waiver. No, they have to go through a process of redoing the study, which can be a costly study for them to do, and maybe would prevent an affordable housing developer from doing that.
Okay, so there'll still be some waiver authority for the superintendent at the superintendent level for the 55 and over? No?
Oh, well, those are granted in this resolution, so those will be signed off and removed as well.
But those are the only kind of waiver, after that it'd be more objective?
After that, affordable housing, so the other isn't an affordable housing situation. It's, I'm giving a waiver to exclude because there are no children in this development.
Okay,
And it's
But,
deed restricted. So.
right, it's got to meet that guideline. But this, for affordable housing, this would be the new criterion process.
and it's more objective.
I could probably elaborate a little bit on that. Yeah, it really was created by our current system, where we had one number regardless of size. So by going to this new tiered system, you shouldn't get those challenges. So, but the old one almost encouraged challenges, because if you were gonna build small houses, you had to pay the same fee as a big house.
Okay.
So it should take care of itself, I think.
Okay. And then you're proposing a 35% reduction for after they meet certain criteria?
Yeah, they meet the LURA, they have in hand a LURA agreement with the county, yes.
And would that be probably housing units in the 1,000 or less?
Probably, more than likely,
Those would probably be apartments, would they not? That
yeah, multifamily.
that are being rented, or?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're not talking about mortgages here, we're talking about people's rent, stuff like that. Okay. So how many, like what percentage of all maybe that's hard to ask. I'm just trying to get a handle on what percentage of the whole total housing units that are being built would actually fall into this LURA category where we would then be reducing these fees, or?
Well, we would be hoping that, they would be somewhere around the 7%, because at that point, you may see some movement that helps for the workforce and affordable housing sector. Right now, it's a small percentage. I mean, as I said, out of all, and I'm not sure of all of the applications that went through, but it was only 965 units were constructed in 2022 that
1,000
qualified
less.
for 965 units. So it's very small, but it's hoping that once we do some incentives, and the incentives that come out through the county, and there is some going on in Tallahassee in regards to tax exemptions and grant funding to the affordable housing groups in the municipalities, that hopefully that will push it up a little bit.
That's all I have, thank you.
I too, I'll say, like Ms. Messenger, I support the 35%. I think that's the way that we can truly impact and help the affordable housing. We're not in the business of granting developers rights to build and all that kind of stuff. That's not what we do up here. That's the county. But I think we need to help if we can, and I think it's a good solution. So I'm all for the 35% discount. So with that, is there any other questions for Mr. Rinaldi on the impact fee study? All right.
Thank you very much.
Can we just get what's the next steps?
Right.
Obviously, we've done this a couple times. We looked at the study.
Mr. Dye and Mike Penley and I are working on the resolution right now,
Okay.
and we'll incorporate the information we gathered today into that resolution.
Perfect. Then it'll come to us, we vote, then it goes to the county.
Yep.
Awesome.
And we'll get a chance to review that before it
Yes.
comes. Okay.
We'll send drafts out. Yeah.
Okay.
Mike Conley's gonna have to work fast.
Yeah.
He's gonna have to work fast.
24 hours.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Mr. Rinaldi.
Thank you. All right, so that moves us We've only been an hour, so we're good. No breaks needed, I don't think.
Do we have any public?
Moves us to number 2. Item number 2 on the workshop today is discussion of the Citizens Financial Oversight Committee, or CFOC for short. And Ms. Harrigan, would you like to come up and present?
Okay, I hope you all got your little packet to review.
Yes.
So first off, just thank you for trusting us to do this, and I just want to thank my committee that worked hard on this, and our liaison. And you over there, Ms. Saunders, that's leaving. I want you to look at the date. We were done with our report in March, right when we were supposed to, so just wanted you to know that, and we're already starting on next year's report, now adding the arts. So I didn't know if you had any questions, and Mr. Aaron's here. He helped, compile the report.
Yep.
Okay.
Do you want to talk about anything specifically?
I don't know,
Okay.
unless you all have questions.
No, we can jump. I mean, I've read it and gone over it. We can jump right to questions. Mr. Tatum, did you have any questions after reviewing?
Not this time. no.
Okay. Ms. Foreman?
I do.
Uh-oh.
And if you take a look at page 4, the analysis, this is an exact replica of last year's analysis, except for the June 30, 2022 date. So I don't know that we have the complete report.
Okay, let me see.
Mr. Aaron.
I know she's
put the report in.
Yeah, she's just saying that the date changed, the words are.
Yeah, if you look at the third paragraph, as of June 30, 2022, 4 members' terms are expiring. I'm looking at page 2, that's on page 2.
Oh, you're on
Page 2 has
two.
the same
Okay,
problem.
all right.
But page 4, okay, yes, the second paragraph, Schedule B, the 4.66%, the expenditures, 2.74 and 29.66. It's exactly, it's verbatim from last year, so I think we need a different version of the report. It's probably floating around out there somewhere.
Probably is.
'Cause I have no doubt that you guys did the work.
I just wondered where the page is, yeah. And who helped us was Christian. So I don't know, like where the paperwork ended up.
Yeah, but,
Okay, so we just need to update that.
yeah, before we
On
can.
2 and 4?
Well, you'll need to go through page by page, but like page 2, third paragraph, as of June 30, 2022, 4 members' terms are expiring.
Well, we do have, don't we
That
have
was,
4?
that was a year ago.
Yeah, but I think we still do.
Do you have another 4 in 2023?
I think we have.
But anyway, but you need to update it because that's verbatim what it was the year
Yeah,
before.
I didn't catch that, yeah.
And, so I apologize. I mean, I just feel really,
Yeah, no, we.
really
went
terrible.
By page by page by page.
Yeah, so.
I don't know where, okay.
Okay. Now, on page 7, the number of schools by letter grade, does that include charters? The 62 schools?
You're on page what? 4?
Yes, that would include all public schools if it's in there.
Okay, and they do participate they get a share of
They
this?
get a
so-
share of this.
Yeah, okay, all
Yes.
right, so that makes sense, all right. Susan, don't worry about it.
No, she thinks she has a different one that was updated before.
There was if I could say as liaison, there was a transition between Christian leaving and them trying to get the reports from where he had sent emails to Ms. Harrigan. And during that transition, the reports were getting a little confusing. And I looked at several of them, I'm like, okay, this is the one that we worked on. And then the last meeting that we had, they confirmed that they went through every page. So somewhere we've gotten maybe some missed reports or missed pages. From what I looked at, I thought everything was okay. But Ms. Foreman is pretty specific into dialing in on some things. And you're looking at page, I don't have the printed version here. You're looking at page 4.
I was looking at page 4, yeah.
4. I know they did discuss there wasn't a lot of change in some of these paragraphs. Am I correct, Mr. Aaron, that when we reviewed this at the CFOC, that some of the paragraphs would remain the same, that just the date would change?
Yeah, oftentimes the date would change, it would just be it would just be the title of the chart that was attached to it, that would be the current one.
May I ask Mr. Aaron a question then?
Sure,
Sure.
sure. He's the one that worked on this report.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, I'm moving on from that issue because I think you guys, I appreciate you guys so much, and I know you worked hard, and yes, it can be tedious and detailed and awful, but no, I appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
I just want you to know that. Like I said, I compared to the prior year, and the prior year had some information in it that I was curious as to why it was not left here. And that was breaking down the instructional staff retention by elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, because they do vary, quite a bit. And whereas this report just says retention rate is 84%.
Right. It's broken down by all staff and by instructional staff.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. Well, I don't think there was a particular decision to omit that analysis, but the big change was that the school department responsible for the data, at our suggestion from several meetings back, was to clarify what retention was. And so they changed the way that they collected the data for the retention. So if you would look at this year's report versus last year's report, you would see I believe, a decline in actually the retention data. Although in this year, we're actually starting to see a climb back up in the retention data. And that was mostly due to the way that they collected the retention data. And I don't want to put words into the mouth of the staff, but I think the issue was that the previous retention data had lots of fluctuations in it because of the way that they collected it, and now there's a date certain that they use to collect the retention data from year to year. And so, again, it's our hopes, and I think it's starting to show in this year's data that the retention is increasing, which is, of course, the whole purpose, or one of the purposes of the millage.
And the data collection has improved.
Improved and
because of the citizen financial
right,
oversight
and
committee.
simplified. So we worked with that data table, which did not have the breakdown, so it wasn't an intentional omission of that. And your suggestion that we look at any differences by school level is a good one, and we'll take that into
Going
account.
forward, yeah.
Right.
Last year, which I find very interesting, is high schools retain 90%. This is in the year before the report. And Manatee Technical College retained 82%, which makes sense. You got professionals coming in and out.
Right.
So I think that information is relevant, you know, and.
By school level.
By school level.
School
And I
level,
would love to
absolutely.
see that coming forward. And I do appreciate the work that you all did and that ERP did and Human Resources to get,
Right.
to get that back in place. Or to be able to accumulate that data, so. And that's what I had, but.
Okay.
I will add to that that we started asking HR about not the retention, but the turnover. Because that's the whole thing, but with tracking, retention is actually a turnover. So to clarify that more, if a seat was, a position was open and filled, that was just retaining that seat or that job, where now we're trying to look at the turnover. We have this teacher position, and if that teacher left and we brought someone in, that's a turnover. So that's kind of the direction that the CFOC was going to determine what the turnover rate instead of the retention. Because we have those jobs. They're out there. The seats are there, the positions, whatever category you want to put them in. But if we're losing a teacher and putting another teacher in, that wasn't considered as a, we considered that as a retention, but not that we changed that teacher out. So I think that's the direction that the CFOC has been going for the turnover instead of the retention. So that might be part of the reason why the number looks a little different, because I think that's the direction that we want to go.
Tracking more the employee number now,
Right,
because they may move to a different position. They didn't
They're still
know.
here, yeah.
Yeah, they're still, still a teacher or whatever, but
Right.
different place.
right.
Ms. Spray, do you have anything else to add?
No, they just sent us an emailed version of the same report. And if there might be a little correction of date here and there, but I think overall, the numbers are correct. I know Mr. Aaron spent a great deal of time working on this report, and I commend all of the committee for the efforts they put into this. As a liaison, maybe I missed one or two things there, but I reviewed this several times. Did I take a page line to line from last year? No, I didn't, because pretty much it stays the same. It's just plugging in the new data from year to year. It's just a matter of changing the date and timeline. So I want to thank you all for doing all the work that you did. And I commend you also for starting to look in advance now, moving forward for next year's report. Of course, you got the first quarter, second quarter, and all of that. So you can actually start earlier. So getting this done and getting this on the agenda moving forward, I would like to make sure that when we do ask to get the report from the chair of the committee on the workshop and then approve it at the next meeting or whatever that process is, that we kind of look at that. I know I did ask about this, and it took a while to get it on the agenda because we had so many things going on with the superintendent search. So I just want to say thank you to all of you and to everyone that's on this committee.
Thank you. Do you
Yeah.
want to add something?
Yeah, I did, I just pulled up the red line, and the page 4 numbers are still identical with the year before.
Okay.
If you want, we could, you know, I just ask that you
We'll
take a
just
look
go
at it and get us, you know,
So the recommendation is to update page 4. and-
well,
right.
and page 2, they just need to go through and take a close, you know, take another look at it.
Okay. Ms. Messenger?
I just want to thank you guys for your time. I know how much it is to volunteer and take this on, and so I just really appreciate you guys. So that's it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for your work. I know it's been said multiple times, but it doesn't go unnoticed. I know you guys aren't doing it for a lot of money. And so we do thank you for this. And, one of the couple numbers that and Superintendent Saunders, you can kind of maybe shed some light on this, just because now we get to look at numbers, we get to look at data that we never really looked at before and things like that. The graduation rate, I wish we could see some data like before 2015 as well. Like if Manatee County for 30, 40 years has always been hovering around 80 to 85% graduation rate, right? Like I
can tell you it hasn't.
Okay. And so that's something I would like to know. Like, and if you do know that, like 20, 30 years ago, what was it? Or
When
you know what I mean?
When I
Like,
arrived, it was in the 70s.
okay. So obviously it's going to fluctuate year to year, but I don't want us to look at data and be like, oh, we're 80, the state's 87. Why are we so bad? I think that graduation rate, retention rate of teachers goes way beyond what just the referendum is doing. Meaning there's so many more factors of retention and retaining teachers than just what the pay was. I didn't leave teaching just solely on pay. So I think that it's part of the data, but it shouldn't be what drives is the referendum effective or not. Because unless we're doing exit, and maybe we do, and we don't have that data, unless we're doing exit surveys with teachers why they're leaving. We had a teacher 2 months ago, maybe, not even, left because of legislative laws that were passed. Nothing to do with us five decisions or any principal or kids are so bad these days, right? All the things you hear. It had nothing to do with that. It had everything to do with, for her, leaving because of laws that were being passed. And she didn't want to be a teacher anymore.
Mr.
So,
Chair, I might.
Yeah, go ahead.
Right. For the time that I've been on the CFAC, this has been much of what the discussion has been, which is what are the metrics that we need to keep to see the effectiveness of the millage increase. And of course, many of those things are things that are soft things that are hard to capitalize on through the data. The school board does do, I think, a required exit interview, but those are voluntary. And so the number of those interviews and the veracity of those interviews are suspect, and we haven't entertained the use of that data because of that information. Let me say this, that in our last meeting, and recognition to the superintendent's staff, we are already meeting with the arts staff to have them begin to collect the metrics that we would need to look at to determine the effectiveness on the arts in the millage increase. So I feel your your information about that.
And I say that because I know what the referendum said and the verbiage and that sort of thing. But you want to look at retention. Today's Thursday. Was it Tuesday? We had the the community partnership luncheon. Mm-hmm. And here's a school in Manatee Elementary that had 0 teachers leave, and normally was like, what'd she say? 80% was, yeah. I mean, it was like a 50% turnover rate, basically, right? And so, what do you tie that to, right? There's a lot of things that could be. Is it the principal leadership? A lot of it has to do with that. Is the community partnership that we formed with that school with the wraparound services, and the teachers feel like they are really a part of something bigger than just, hey, we're reading, writing, and arithmetic. We're writing. So, for me, I have the teachers that I know who have left in the last year or so. It has not been because of pay. Mm-hmm. It has not been because we were making $45,000 instead of now $55,000. It had not. So that to me is, I just feel, and I know I may be opening a can of worms, but sometimes you look at some of this data and it's way more plays into this than that. And just like a student passing a test at the end of the year, reading tests, writing, math, it doesn't matter. Maybe that kid woke up to parents fighting, whatever stuff happening. I mean, you don't know. And so I just want to make sure we're taking that in perspective, all this data in perspective, that that just because rates of graduation went down 5% from 2021 to 2022, not saying we shouldn't look to say, what do we do differently? Can we do better? Of course. But I don't know if that's a knock against the referendum, right?
Well, I think the CFOC could entertain possibly collecting some more anecdotal data to maybe humanize the numbers a little bit and help the school board see what other kinds of programs reinforce the retention of teachers other than salary.
Sure, yeah.
And maybe to your point, tying it back to specific results, maybe we could add into this report the math and reading data that we get. I don't know if that would be a possibility. You know,
Again, I think that's
yeah.
subjective. I think that just as much as retention is subjective somewhat.
Yeah.
If our goal we're getting like kind of out of the weeds in this,
Right,
and
that's
so
all right.
this is going to be something that we'll discuss, obviously in the next probably year to get ready for the next one. But the bottom line was there was not the funding wasn't there to do what we needed to do, and you can word things however you want to word things, but salaries have increased. We're one of the best salaries in the state of Florida. Our numbers of teachers we don't have open vacancies is less than others. We are attracting people from Sarasota, from Hillsborough, etc., which we used to lose them. I taught with them and they left for Sarasota because of the pay. You don't really hear that anymore.
No.
And so, anyways, I don't know where I'm going with that. It's just soapbox. I'll get off my soapbox.
I just want to make sure, like, I want to make sure that what I heard or what I think could be construed by what you're saying, you kind of changed a little bit just now what you just said, but previously what you had said was something like, it's not all about the pay. I don't want that to be construed as this isn't necessary. I don't think that's your argument, but I want to.
Caught up. That's why.
Right. I want to make it really clear that it wasn't just the pay, and the millage sends a whole nother message to employees. And it's not just pay. It's we support you. Sure. The community by 70% supports you. And that is huge. That feeling, because there's a lot of educators that don't feel supported by the state, as you've heard. That happened. The reason why they're leaving is not pay. I agree with you. And when we went out for this, I said that. I don't think it's just pay. It is the message that they get based on legislation, based on the rules. So I want to make sure that it's not just pay. This is a message that gets sent to employees that you are valued in this community. Maybe you don't feel like that other places, but here in Manatee County, 70% of this community says, we appreciate you. We want you to get paid better. We think that you're doing a great job, and we appreciate you. And then there's just more than just money tied to this. And I just wanted to make sure that was stated. So thank you.
I don't think there's anything else.
Thank you.
So really appreciate it.
Thank you, board.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Board members.
So
Yeah.
we are going to talk about the charter too, right? Not just the report.
Right.
Are we going to talk about the charter too?
Charter is on our
If
attachment.
we have any questions
It's on the attachment
the
with a
charter,
red
there was
line.
a couple red line stuff.
Yep.
Yeah, go ahead.
And two, I do want to bring up that we have 9 active members on here. The charter says up to 12. We didn't fill my position when I left. And thank you to IT for updating the members of the committee. I want to encourage anyone that's would like to get involved to submit their resume through email to Ms. Cox, and then she will share that with the board to add to this committee. I think,
There is a link online now.
I'm guessing there's a link online
There
now
is.
for that?
They sent that email out to us.
Right, so please, if you're interested in serving on this committee, do so. We could use your help. It's a very rewarding committee, I think. They're very engaged. So I would encourage anyone to get on there, so, yeah, and that's all.
Ms.
We also
Lester, and
have-
then you can bring up the charter.
No, I was gonna ask a question about the charter.
Oh,
I was just gonna ask the chair, have they reviewed this and are these their recommendations?
We are reviewing it at our next meeting.
Did we not review this? No, we didn't. You're right, we did not.
The charter
Right,
itself.
the charter itself. It is attached to the
It is attached with some red
workshop,
line.
but with the red line that
The red
Ms.
line is-
Foreman had recommended those changes.
But it may not be necessary, or I don't know, maybe, but
Right.
if the unions don't succeed after this last legislative change, you know, that we may not have, we still want the union representatives on the committee, but I don't know how that's gonna work.
Yeah, let's look at that.
It's not gonna be a question, Ms. Foreman. We will still be the bargaining agent, I can
Okay,
assure you.
what about ASME?
I have no knowledge of ASME, but I
Yeah,
can tell
yeah.
you that MEA will still.
Okay, all right, well,
Okay.
so
Well-
we will proceed with this then.
100%,
Yeah,
MEA
yeah.
will still be the bargaining agent.
Yeah.
Okay,
But
So,
please let
Mr.
the,
so,
let the
Mr. Tatum
committee
had a,
discuss it.
was that it, Ms. Foreman? I'm sorry. to
Yes.
interrupt.
Mhm.
Mr. Tatum?
Before I say what I'd like to say, are there any other discussions on the, because I have a big picture question to talk about, any other things on the wording of the charter or anything? I agree.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say that I don't necessarily feel comfortable even discussing it if the committee hasn't, because they might have totally different recommendations. I don't really know. They might know what's even more appropriate than what's before us, and typically, yeah, the board will adjust it and edit it, but we always get feedback from the committee, so I don't know if I feel comfortable even really truly discussing it because we haven't gotten feedback from the committee.
So what we have is not, for, you guys have not done anything with the charter yet. Okay. I did not know that. So with that, are you wanting to talk about the charter or just
Yeah.
overall?
Well, the charter, but overall, about the CFOG.
Okay, I'm okay with hearing what you have to say.
So first, for the people on the CFOC that are here today, you obviously put a lot of work into what you do, and there's a lot of information in this report. So what I'm going to talk about is, as a business perspective, it has nothing to do with personalities or anything like that. So, and maybe Mr. Dye can help us too here. One thing that I like to try and look at is overall administrative burden on what it is that we do. And in talking with some other people about the CFOG, it appears, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Dye, that the referendum required that we have an oversight committee of citizens to review expenditures, but it didn't necessarily require this committee. In the sense that, for instance, we have an audit committee. And could the audit committee perform this same function to help us relieve some of the administrative burden that's on the school system? I guess the question is, could the audit committee perform this same function? Because they are a committee of citizens who would provide oversight for the spending.
I think in theory they could, but right now their mission does not include that in their charter.
True.
But you're correct, in the preamble, the mission statement in the charter itself describes that this was the citizen committee that was required by the referendum to review the expenditure and the outcome of the expenditures.
Okay.
So it was formed independent of the existing audit committee.
Right. So Mike, I would just like to know if there's any appetite to consider that possibility that we transfer this function to the audit committee. You know, you have to have a meeting, it's in the sunshine, there's administrative burden that goes along with it, and to give this function to the audit committee, and just to help reduce the overall burden on the staff, as well as, you know, whatever other work goes along with it. With understanding that you all do good work, and I appreciate the information that I see in front of us, but from a business perspective, if the audit committee could do this and not have to go through all the administrative burden of the CFOC, I think it's something that we might want to consider.
Oh, I'll start with that real quick. This was presented like what, a year or so ago?
I was gonna say, I think sitting here, I've heard this debated 2, maybe 3 times.
And but it's okay.
I'm sorry it's not an original idea of yours. I've really heard this debate
But-
at least twice, if not 3 times.
But I do think, I agree with the reason why, when the last time this came up, I did not agree with changing now is because it was that we hadn't presented that to the public, right, with the new referendum. I would have the appetite to look into something like you're talking about when the time comes for the next referendum, et cetera, right? Is to maybe look at charters. Yes, I would say yes to that. And I agree with you. And only reason is because the burden it causes on the staff, right? Our staff that has their normal functions of day-to-day work running this big organization, very big organization. Then they have audits from our own internal auditors and the audit committee, from the auditor generals, and then on top of that, the CFOC. So I do agree with you. I think from a burden standpoint, yes, there's just, at some point, you've got to look at the staff and say, what are we missing or what are we not doing? They can't do everything. It's only 24 hours in a day, and we only pay them for 9. So I agree with you. I think I would be, I don't think necessarily today is that time for that, but I do think I would be 100% for looking into something. And I don't know what that looks like, right? I don't know if it's all thrown on the audit committee. I don't know what that looks like, but I would have an appetite to look at that.
But you think that up until the next referendum voting day, it would not be in keeping with the spirit of what we're doing to eliminate the CFOC?
I think it'd be too early now, correct.
Okay.
So I'd wait another year or so, whatever it is.
Okay, and I'd be interested in hearing what previous discussions on this, so I'm informed
Yeah.
about it. I mean, I'm bringing up the question.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's a good question.
Yeah.
You really want to hear from me?
Yeah.
Okay, first of all, I'm not sure we're gonna have a full audit committee after.
Your time's up.
So, no, you need to go to the next meeting and make some amends. Number 2 is, that's not the role of the audit committee. The audit committee oversees the services of vendors that we've hired, okay? So instead of having a volunteer committee do a lot of the work, a lot of the coordination, a lot of the administration, okay? And you'd have CRI doing it. You'd be paying them more. And trust me, this is a bargain, okay? It's not a function for the audit committee, okay? That's not how they operate. And when we have the workshop on the 29th of July, I think you might get a better feel. I would recommend that all of you try to attend the next meeting. I know, Ms. Bryce, since you've been on the board, you have attended an audit committee meeting, and you'll get a better feel for what they do. We don't have them going out in the field and doing any auditing or even pulling in data. Even the sales tax, which was on the referendum, CRI goes out and does that. They've developed a system, and they go out and they pull the data in, and there is no analysis done by the audit committee. They do not prepare reports. They review, and it's just not it's not appropriate. And then finally, we add so much stuff to the audit committee, and we treat them terribly. They have been abused off and on for the last 10 years, and these discussions when they happen about whether they should take on the referendum. You know, it doesn't help matters, so I don't even want to talk about it, so.
Ms. Brown?
Oh, my goodness. That's a lot to unpack. I guess I don't understand the concept that the audit committee is abused. They volunteer, so I think if they were abused, they wouldn't be serving.
Some aren't.
I'm sorry?
Some have pulled off. I mean, it's been off and on, but it's a history. It's a history. There have been.
Well, then we need to change the relationship maybe with what the volunteers are doing with the audit and or CFOC, because if people are leaving because of the mistreatment, where's the mistreatment at? By staff or other members?
Or this board.
Or this board? As long as I've been on this board, I don't feel like I've mistreated anyone that has been at a meeting. I don't feel that way. If I have, forgive me, but that's kind of harsh language, I think, that we have mistreated our volunteers. I don't think that the CFOC feels that way. If they do, maybe it was before I got in this chair. And you said that the audit committee only looks at vendors?
It looks at what the work of CRI and the external auditors, Moore Stevenson, it's not MSL anymore, Cherry Becker.
Right.
They do the work, and we pay them big bucks.
I understand that. I could see how we could incorporate this into, if we blended the audit and the CFOC members, I could see something like that happening. I think that both of those charters would have to be blended in a sorts to see what they do, because the audit committee are, again, volunteers. It's not the people we're paying like we do CRI. With all the debate that we had with CRI on Tuesday, we do pay them. What we're having the CFOC and the audit committee look at is our business, what we spend the dollars on. I don't think the CFOC ever looks at vendors. I think maybe CRI might look at vendors and how we're spending the money, but.
CRI is the vendor.
I understand they are the vendor, but the audit committee is auditing what they looked at? Is that what you're telling me? That that's all the audit committee looks at, is just what CRI presents?
They don't audit. Audit committee does not audit, it oversees.
Okay, so then maybe they should be called the oversight committee.
You can call it
If they're
whatever
not auditing, I mean, to me, I think they actually have done a tremendous job in auditing what they look at.
They don't audit anything.
Okay. So why are we calling them the audit committee? I guess that's a little,
Let me ask you this, would you be in favor or not in favor of looking at something like Mr. Tatum is saying? I mean, I think we're getting a lot of answers, a lot of this stuff is gonna be answered
when
in
we
the
renew
workshop
the, right.
or the audit, and so my question is, are you willing to look into, that's all he's really asking now.
My opinion would be to ask the CFOC if they would be willing to
I'll get both of them.
shift
Absolutely.
and blend with the audit committee. That would be, you know, I don't want to put a big burden on them and have them say, oh, we got to choose what we're going to do. I mean, we have all of these members that's been on here for a while. I know Ms. Harrigan has been on this committee since its inception. Ms. Barber has, Ms. Howell has. Some of those members have been, Mr. Aaron's done a great job on here. So it would be, I think it would be a discussion for them to put on their agenda to talk about, as well as the charter red line that Ms. Foreman had presented. And I apologize they didn't get to that, but other things came up that they felt that was more important to discuss. So I would entertain it.
Okay.
Okay, I really would entertain it because I think there is a lot of strain on staff. But I think too, trying to separate the two functions, we have to really try to blend all of that, and we'll have to really think hard how to do that. And it's just as liaison, Ms. Foreman to the audit and liaison to the CFOC, I think we both need to talk to those committees and say, what do you think? How do you think this function or how this blended committee could work? And then two, encourage volunteers to apply to serve would help as well. And then we'd have to look at, okay, how many members are we gonna have? The CFOC has up to, I think, 12 members, I think it said. And I don't know what the count on the audit committee is, how many members that they are allowed to have per their charter. But yeah, I would entertain looking at, explore, I guess would be the good word for that, explore it.
Ms. Messenger?
Yeah, like I've said, I've had this debate multiple times. Just some things to consider for this debate. There are different skill sets and requirements for these two committees. The audit committee has a really specific skill set, and that's because they do review all of the audits, and in order to effectively and efficiently review all those audits, you need to have a certain skill set. Whereas the CFOC, we look for business background, finance background, accounting backgrounds. We look for those type of backgrounds so that they can look at the finances, but also the other aspects that come along with this. So one thing to consider in that debate. Another thing to consider in that debate, and like I said, these are just things that have come up in the debates that we've had previously, so I just want you to be aware of them, was that part of that resolution also talks about the outcomes of the millage. And this has always been the debate of what does that mean? And we've had lots of debates on what that really means. And you might have a different opinion. This board might have a different opinion of what the word outcomes means now than the board did a couple years ago. And maybe that is worth a debate. But there has been a debate multiple times about the word outcomes. And the understanding of that word probably would differentiate whether this would be even feasible, right? So there was also a suggestion of merging the two committees. I don't think that would be feasible. Like I said, there are different skill sets and requirements for these two committees. I don't think you can really effectively do that without changing the skill sets of what is necessary for those two different jobs and skill sets. There has been discussions before about making it a subcommittee of the audit committee. I've heard that one. I don't know, I've heard lots of different ones. And the last concern that has been brought up in debates before is that this will overload the audit committee if you were to do that, because it's not a huge committee. It does have a different skill set and requirements. So if you lumped it in there, you really wouldn't be able to merge them effectively because they really require different things. So you would be perhaps overloading that committee. Those are things that we can debate at a later date. If you want to have that debate, that's fine with me. Like I said, I've had it several times. These are just some of the things that have come up, and I'm sure I'll think of more as time goes on because I wasn't expecting that. So these are just the ones I thought off the top of my head that I've heard multiple times. I personally don't think it's probably the best option, but I'm willing to hear if there are better options, or if we can come up with something, then that's fine. I don't think you could do it at this point because I do think it's promised in the millage the way it is laid out, and that would probably have to be a language change. And perhaps if we did change the language, then maybe that would be something different. If we specified what outcomes meant, or if we remove that language or whatever, but that's like a whole different debate, right? Then maybe the discussion could be different, because then maybe you would only need a CRI audit of the finances rather than what is outcomes. I don't know. But to me, that's all worth, if you want to have a discussion or debate about it, if you have a different idea, that's fine with me. I'm fine with that. Whenever you want to have it.
So Mr. Dye, did the millage verbiage, the legal verbiage say that we had to have, the committee had to provide oversight of outcomes or not?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And that's been a difficult analysis.
Right. Because that's what I mean, I went to one CFOC and then I watched the whole millage, the renewal of the millage take place and the conversations within the public, and the CFOC report was, to some degree, at the time I think it said something about we cannot provide definitive proof that the millage money, which has been used, actually achieved what it was going to achieve. And so, and it's hard, and so then what happened was people who were not in favor of the millage took that and said, see right here, the report says that.
I'm aware of what happens.
Yeah, you're okay. And so then I'm trying to think, like I said, a bigger picture and say, well, how could we do this better so that, because you had the discussion too about, well, how, and I brought this up at the last board meeting about correlation and causation. You have a money, you spend it, you look at some result and you say, see, that was causation. Well, who knows whether that was causation or correlation, and can you prove it? And somehow making this a little tighter, and it seems like the audit committee, anyway, just something making it a little tighter and reducing the administrative burden. It's just the overall idea that I'm trying to have, to keep it from being, used like it was last time as a political bludgeon, to actually go against the millage and to make it a little more objective instead of subjective.
But I think the only way you'd really be able to, I think the only way you'd really be able to make it objective is if you really did a financial audit.
Yeah.
Personally, I don't think, because a lot of the other things like the retention rate, like it's been calculated different. And so when you're looking at it, that's really hard. Or if you're looking at the school grades or any of those things, like there's so many other things that can cause the school grade or the graduation rate to go down. Those kids spent a year or two on a computer learning, or they came from out of state where they were on the computer even longer, and we've gotten them, and now our graduation rate is tanking. So there are so many other pieces to why the data looks like this. And so I agree with you, it is more subjective because there's a lot of other pieces. Like you can't say, well, were those kids, you wanted to have it accurate, only count the kids' graduation rate if they've been there since the millage began. Then you have, but that's not what we can have, right? So you have all these kids that are coming in from all these different places because they're unhappy with wherever they're at. They've been at home for years. They don't have, it's just, there's a lot of other pieces. And the same thing with educators. We were just talking about, like, they're leaving for a lot of other reasons. And that's not going to ever show up in what we're getting, right? So, like I said, the word outcomes has been debated so many times.
Right.
Because what does that mean? Even the committee, I remember when the committee first began, they had debates on what does that even mean? So I'm open to having any discussion you want to have. I think that it would have to come from a language change in the resolution, personally, but I think we can have that conversation.
To a lot of what we're saying, when you look at the referendum and some of the money that's going towards the STEM, for instance, what effect does having a program, the innovative programs we have like Guy Harvey, et cetera, what effect does that have on the community, people moving here? Development may be great, and there may be beautiful houses being built, but no offense to some other places in the state or in the world, but like you got to have a great place to live, which means stuff to do, great schools for families, etc. Right? Business opportunities. So I think that you just can't measure, in my personal opinion, and again, this kind of comes with outcome. You just can't measure what the effect has, to be honest, because how many businesses are moving here? Because when they do come here, they ask MTC, can you add a program to train people to get them ready to go for our business? Right. I mean, so there's just a lot of, but it's a great debate.
I do want to say, the skill set has been brought up a couple of times here. The skill set of the experience that we have with these volunteers, they're former professionals. They're not just the, you know, whatever. They're professional people that are asking the right questions. If they don't know don't know what data or question to ask, they seek that out. But, you know, I think they all have some professional background, or they wouldn't even apply. They send in the resume. I know I sent mine when I was on the committee, and I'm sure when this committee began, they were all appointed. Did they send in resumes? I wasn't here then, but I'm pretty sure they did. So they were selected by their skill set. It wasn't just, you know, so there was people, and then Ms. Foreman served as liaison for the whole time, I believe, when it first started, did you not?
I
Or,
wasn't a liaison, I was a member.
you was a member, that's right, I'm
And
sorry.
I was a member because I was a CPA, and I have an educational background in accounting and auditing is very different from accounting. There are different, it's very different. It's not something that a layperson picks up. You know.
Right, and I don't think that we have that on this committee or on the audit committee.
No, you have lay people on the CPOC.
I'm sorry?
There are lay people on the CPOC. Well, I shouldn't say lay, I'm thinking of it in terms of they are not, no, I'm sorry, I don't want to.
I understand where you're going, that's fine. But that's why we asked for their resumes, so we can review and see if they have the skill set to ask the questions, to get the data, to get the report together, and to analyze outcomes. And from when Mr. Christopher was on this committee, and there was a huge room of people on that committee, including yourself, that was one of the things that okay, we got to figure out what our columns of outcome results are going to be for this report. So this committee has just taken data from year to year and asked for the same thing over and over, but when it comes to the retention versus turnover, that was a recommendation that was brought up a number of, probably 2 years ago, and we never got the answers. We couldn't get it to refine it to what we wanted to look at. And now I think we can do that with the system. So, yeah, I'm defending the volunteers that work on both committees with their backgrounds. Maybe some don't have the accounting, but they might have something else that they're bringing to the table.
Ms. Saunders, can I?
Yeah, sure.
Correct my recollection. Did you and I not have a conversation about this one time where and what I'm getting to, I asked Mr. Divet, that the mission of the Citizens Oversight Committee for this millage was simply to look at the money and see if it was spent in accordance with the language, and that there's no mandate for them to look at outcomes. We may have put that in the charter, but that the legal wording of the referendum was simply look at the money, how it was spent, and make sure it was in accordance with the categories that we said it was going to be spent on. Is that?
That is correct. By law, we are supposed to, what we told the citizens was there would be someone to ensure the oversight of the money in, money out was done correctly. It's very, very difficult. I know we made a charter to try to pinpoint very direct correlation between the millage and graduate. You know, I think philosophically we want to say that has a direct impact. It's going to be very hard to prove some of those tangible things, but that the intent of the oversight is a financial oversight. I think we can easily say and show positive outcomes that we've used the millage to keep students engaged in school which in effect leads to graduation and their desire to continue. We know we put money in the arts, we put money in expanding vocational. Part of our financing, our share of the Guy Harvey prior to this appropriation was from the millage. Expanding beyond the appropriation for our Wozniak program is from the millage. So we can show, but can we say the career pathways with Steve Wozniak directly affects third grade reading? I don't know that you can say that, but can you say that having that allows them to be engaged, want to come to school? Coming to school, we know, is going to impart knowledge and lead to that. So the whole intent was so that the citizens knew that it was going to be spent per the language that was on the referendum correctly. And it wasn't just going to be the district saying so. It was going to be an independent citizen group to verify those outcomes.
Because it seems that the issue centers around the outcomes, as Ms. Messenger was saying. And if we just limited it to, did the money, here's what the referendum said we were going to do, and did the categorical spending of the money happen in that way? That's a pretty objective thing to look at, whereas
I think you're correct.
correlation and causation, and then it gets used by the public. The people who are for the referendum say, look, we retain teachers, and the people who are against the referendum say, well, the last report said we can't prove anything, and just trying to limit that scope. And then if it was just objective to, and Ms. Foreman is smarter on this than I am, but it sounds like an audit, like, did you spend the money? Then you send it to an audit committee. If it's not the audit committee, then you have an audit committee. And that's what I'm trying to get to, is that there's a lot of controversy that I've seen around this. It becomes political with the outcomes. You've heard me use the quote, there are lies, there are darn lies, and then there are statistics, right? And trying to limit that. But I just wanted to bring it up, and it sounds like for right now, you know, it's a good discussion, since we were talking about the charter and whether we wanted to make a significant change to the charter or not. So it sounds like at this time we don't, but that when the millage comes up for the future referendum and renewing it, that we might want to look at some of these issues again. So I'm glad we had the discussion. We have to have it here. I can't call you and call you and call you and call you and talk about it. Sorry you had to hear it again, Ms. Messenger, but I needed to have it myself.
So for the charter and the changes that Ms. Foreman recommend the committee look at, I mean, we are going to have to redo this anyway, am I correct? The charter for the new,
We would look at it again before the next referendum, yes.
right. So,
So are you asking maybe is there even a reason for them to look at it?
right,
again?
is there any real reason to change it now?
I don't foresee any major changes happening now
I
anyways
don't-
before the next referendum.
I don't think that, you know, I'm asking the board for their opinion. Should they even entertain the red line changes?
I would say, I would say,
It-
well, the red line changes are
It's
something.
very
simple,
minor.
easy. Yeah.
They're very minor.
No, the red line change
The
is
red
about,
line changes is a big change to the committee. I don't
Which
personally.
one?
it is, but it's not a big change in terms of the next referendum. And
That might be
What-
true.
And when the referendum does get passed, which it will, just looking at everybody, it better, then it's a year before that referendum is even worked on because of the time, so.
But the charter would be.
Usually the charter is, you know, you look at everything for the year after for the functioning of the,
So
you don't do it before the
when will the
referendum.
new charter be written? After the vote?
Yes, after the
Okay,
election,
so it would be after November of
2024. Mhm.
So I do like the one change to make the union members non-voting
So
experts.
so you're saying
think
we
that's
should
the only
probably still look at that?
That seemed to me the only.
the only
Yeah,
substantive
okay,
change.
yeah, maybe we should,
Voting members.
maybe they should go ahead and look at that for now. I agree. Yeah, you're right.
I would like their feedback on it before we really,
Okay.
I mean, I don't feel comfortable having a discussion if and I think when this got brought up before, I even said, if the committee supports that, then I will support it, but I don't personally support it. So I would really like feedback from the committee
Okay.
on their opinion on that change, because to me, that is a significant change and we've already had the conversation about it. I don't know how long ago that conversation was. Were you guys here for that? I don't.
They weren't, it was a year or so ago. Yeah.
I don't personally like this change. I do not agree with this change. I have a list of reasons why I don't agree with
I
this
think-
change. I don't need to debate that
Yeah,
today.
I was about to say,
I want their feedback.
If they have not talked about it and they're not presenting that from them,
Well, the recommendation to change that was so we could, I think, Ms. Foreman, what was the recommendation? It was because you thought that it would help support the millage renewal by
well,
making those changes, and I
That's
think
not the-
you're,
That's not my ultimate reason, is that there is a perception
yes.
that union representatives who, they will disagree with me, that they are the beneficiaries of the referendum, and that for that reason, because they benefit, it's a perceived conflict of interest for them to be voting members.
And that's what I agree
But
with
we
her.
still want them on the committee because I think they are just incredible resource, but.
I concur with that, by the way.
I do
the
too.
perception of-
The
Fine, I'll debate
perception.
no, we're not debating this.
I'm debating it right now.
The perception is out there. I have had that feedback, and, I mean, if this is gonna be something that would be okay, I don't think that's gonna work for me, vote, then maybe we should look at that.
We're 2 hours in. I'm trying to take a break.
I'm gonna say
Okay.
one sentence then. Let me say one sentence. Just one thing.
One sentence.
Okay. They review past expenditures. They don't approve future expenditures.
Right.
They have more in it to make sure it's spent correctly. They are not determining how it's being spent. There's no conflict. They aren't making the decision. They are just making sure it got spent the way we promised it was going to get spent. They have more in it than anybody. That's all I'm saying.
They have to look at outcomes. I would agree with you if the outcomes were not part of it. I would agree with you to some degree, but they get to talk about outcomes, teacher retention, how the money's being spent. So they get to vote on this report and the wording of the report as far as outcomes goes. So if it was just about looking at past money, I'd say, okay,
But
maybe.
the outcomes is about the past money,
But-
and the
but-
outcome is the past.
No, it's about saying whether the money did what it was supposed to do, like.
We're getting away from the debate if
May
they
I-
haven't even talked about it.
let's
They
talk-
may not even want it or want it.
May I have the last word?
Yeah.
The optics.
No, I am coming recess and then.
Oh,
No, I'm gonna have the last word as liaison.
no, the optics are, people perceive that there's a conflict of interest, just as people perceive that the audit committee audits.
I agree
The
with her
end.
statement. I agree with her statement, that it's the perception. It's not anything more than that. And, I mean, people have come to me, why are they voting on something that they benefit from? And I went, oh, kind of look at that, but
But they're
then,
not.
but I understand, they're not, they're looking at, so sorry, Ms.
We'll
Foreman.
discuss this.
But I will
Yeah,
say to the CFOC chair, please add this on your agenda to look at it and review it and to update what Ms. Foreman had brought up, if she has a copy of her red line
It's
or.
attached as a.
Yeah, it's
Right.
attached.
We will change that, and then probably, do we have to bring that back then, I guess, after they modify it?
Yes, I mean, we're gonna have to bring it back to vote on it anyways to approve it at a meeting.
Okay, so we can do the updates and send it
Yeah,
out,
I mean, we do.
and then put it on the agenda again
Yeah.
as her presenting?
I don't necessarily think we need another workshop. I mean, I think we've all.
Not a workshop, just
Yeah.
on the, okay,
All right, with that, we're gonna do a 5-minute recess.
thank you.
All right, welcome back. Moving on to our last item of the day, which is the overview of the 23-24 budget, general fund, with Ms. Sellers. So take it away.
All right, good morning.
Good morning.
Well, we've had a series of workshops, budget-related, all budget-related. And so today, we are going to go over the district's, the budget preparation process, how we're getting here and getting through the rest of this period, the projected revenues for all funds. Then we'll just do a quick highlight on the capital revenue. Then we're going to cover the major legislative changes and the FEFP budget revenue, the taxable property revenue, and the budget assumptions that we make for the general fund, and then the requirements for the general fund. Oop. Okay. All right. So in January, we had given an overview of the FEFP funding. So today, we're having to revisit that because of all of the changes that the legislature made. And another big change were that several categoricals were replaced. 5 of them, they have been rolled up into the base FEFP. So that has inflated the base FEFP and the BSA, that base student allocation, without adding any comparable new state revenue. So, and then in July, it's going to be a very busy month for the budget department. So in the middle of the month, we have our advertisement of the budget that we're going to have a special meeting on that we'll need to have the board approve. There are deadlines that are set by the Florida Department of Revenue, and so all of these particular, like the public hearing that will happen at the end of the month for the tentative millage and budget, and then the final in September for the millage and budget, are pretty much set deadlines that would need to be met with the Florida Department of Revenue. So while this presentation is going to cover the general fund, we just wanted to give a perspective of all of the funds for the district. The budget is over $1 billion. So the incoming revenue sources, the operating fund is our largest, 61% of the budget, and the general fund being about 23% of the budget. I'll highlight that one next. We've got our special revenue fund, that's the grants. We've got the internal service fund, which is your health insurance and the workers' comp. We've got the debt service fund, those are our principal and interest payments for our debt service. And the trust and agency, which is the scholarships and donations. So the capital revenue. So this is 23% of the district's budget. Just to highlight the 3 largest sources, which makes up 96% of the capital fund, we've got the 1.5 millage, that is 51% of the capital funds. We've got the sales tax half-cent revenue, that's another 26% of that fund, and the impact fees, which is 17% of the fund. Now, on to the big changes that the state legislature has made. First, we've mentioned this one before, FRS rate increased to 13.57. So that was a $4 million increase. In addition, the FEFP had modifications to the DCD, that was the district cost differential. It has been renamed. It is now comparative wage factor. So its an acronym now is CWF. Those of us may still slide back to the DCD, but I'm going to try to start using the CWF now. So what that is it's calculated the same way. They've changed the name, but they've calculated it the same way. It uses the Florida Price Index. It's a 3-year revolving average, and it is for any district whose calculation is below 1. the CWF is going to roll up to 1. And Manatee benefits from that slightly benefits to that. It's an increase of 1.3 million. This is resulting in higher appropriations that were for the add-ons in the weighted FTE assigned programs AP, AICE, the IB, the CAPE, and dual enrollments. That was about 0.26 million of that 1.3 million increase related to the CWF. And then we have the charter school capital outlay. This is from the 1.5 million that we've been touching on in many different conversations, the 5-year capital plan. This is going to be phased in with a 5-year glide, as we had previously discussed in 23-24. We don't know what that dollar amount is. It's 20%, and that will gradually increase to 100% by year 5. And we also have the change in the SAI. Remember, that one was the Supplemental Academic Instruction. Its name is changing to the Educational Enrichment Allocation.
Oh, man, new
I
acronym.
do not know if an acronym is going to be EEA, because they're not actually doing that, because they still keep saying SAI when they refer to it everywhere. So, but anyhow, apparently it's been renamed. So it has increased 404,000, but we have to be mindful that that increase of 404,000, that the Family Empowerment, or FES, or voucher program, I think that's what I'm going to call it throughout the rest of this presentation, voucher program, is actually 231,000 of that increase in the SAI. So as a result, the district's increase is just 173,000 in that particular allocation. Okay, so the voucher program, that one, that was the Family Empowerment, I'm going to call it voucher program, increased 6.8 million, and that actually includes 5,000 for the voucher student transportation. There was an allocation included in that for those particular students as well. So if you add that particular increase to what it had been, which was 23 million before that, the total FES, or the total voucher program, is $30 million. And it's to be noted that that is not district's money. We see it in the FEFP formula, and it is actually backed out at the end. So we have to be mindful. While we see it run through all of these calculations, it is not the district's money. So I'll do my best to discuss this discretionary, what is really the discretionary funds of the district, as we go through this conversation. So, and another big change had to do with the FEFP, eliminating 5 of the categoricals. Now last year, or this past year, those 5 categoricals totaled $23 million, and it is rolling up into the FEFP base funding. It is reappearing as mandated expenditures for 23-24, costing $27 million. So that is 66% of the increase in the district's base is related to these rolled up categoricals. Now, those roll-up categoricals are the reading instruction, about $3 million, instructional materials, $4 million, the classroom supplies, almost $1 million, and the funding comprehension and hold harmless allocation was $1.5 million. And lastly was also the classroom teacher salary increase allocation of $17.8 million. Now, a breakdown of that one is we have to maintain, of that balance, $13.5 million for the teacher salary increases. That's to maintain their salaries. Remember, they had the minimum salaries of $47,500, and then there's a required raise increase of $4.2 million. That's how we get to the $17.8 million. So the BSA, it increased 553 per student to 5,139. But the discretionary funds per student is actually 4,700 due to removing the rolled up categoricals and the voucher program that is included in that funding. So the actual discretionary fund increase, once you take out those two pieces, the increase is 204 versus what you see as the 553 per student increase. So again, the FEFP formula was established 1973, and this is the conceptual idea that the state has a mechanism that's going to provide substantially equal school funding across the state, regardless of the economic conditions of the county or the geographical location. So, y'all remember this big bucket presentation, right? Okay, so this is the FEFP budget revenue for 23-24. Now, let me address the color codings we've got in here. The gold are the total boxes. The peach is the formula factors. We've got green is the local effort, and the blue is the voucher program. So, the FTE, we have 53,000 is what the state has given us to projected, but 93% of that is actually the districts, and 19% of the districts is actually charter schools. So the other 7% is related to the voucher program and the virtual students. So the unweighted FTE increase, 1,600. However, 56% of that is the voucher program students. So the base student allocation, 5,138. We multiply that by the CWF to arrive at our base funding increase of 41 million. Now the base FEFP totals 299 million. It's the second row left box. And it includes the 27 million of the rolled up categoricals and 30 million for the voucher program. So the discretionary base is actually 214 million. Now divide that by the 50,000 that is the sole district students, and we have a discretionary fund balance of 4,792 per student. So for the remaining earmarked categoricals, we have the ESE guaranteed allocation. That had the increase of 913,000. Now, out of that 913,000 increase, 907 goes to the voucher program. So the district's real increase in this particular category is just $6,000. Last year, or in 21-22 fiscal year, the actual expenses in this category was 34 million versus the 21 million for the 23-24 fiscal year. So the district will be supplementing the rest of that allocation. And the next box, DJJ supplement, that one decreased 8,000. In 21-22, those expenditures were 484,000. The district will be supplementing the rest of that category as well. And then we have the funding compression hold harmless that rolled up into the BSA. And next we have the instructional material that also rolled up into the BSA. And we have to spend at least the previous year's amount. Manatee, that was 4 million. Then we have the mental health assistance that rose 363,000. Now, it's uncertain right now if the appropriation will cover the new requirements cost. So we'll wait to see if that does occur, obviously, this is another category that the district is going to be supplementing to meet those requirements. Then we have the reading allocation that rolled up into the BSA. And we've got the safe school activities. It increased 718,000 to 4 million. Last year, in 21-22, it was 4.8 million, another category that the district will be supplementing for the rest. And then we have the student transportation. It increased 8.7 million, so that rose just 337,000. In 21-22, the district spent 15.1 million in this category. This is another category as well that the district will be supplementing the rest. So, and the next box, the SAI, the educational enrichment. We just discussed that one, 403,000 increase. The voucher program is taking 231,000 of that. So the net increase for the district is 172,000. So, and then we have the TSIA. This was the other category that also rolled up into the BSA. And the classroom supply that also rolled up into the BSA. And the district will be supplementing the rest for that particular allocation as well. I have a common theme, don't I? So, anyways, so the total gross state and local funding, 350 million. And the required local effort calculation is based on the current year millage rate and the class size reduction. That one is based on the October 2023 FTE survey enrollment, and it had a decrease of 2 million for an allocation of 49 million. And new in this formula on the 5th row is the state-funded discretionary supplement of 6.7 million. Again, this is the voucher program. We see it added here in on the state's calculation, but we are actually pulling it out in the blue box directly below that one because it is not part of the district funding. So that leaves us with the state, total state funding of 192 million. So the local effort, that local effort was an increase of 32 million, which came out of for the RLE and the 0.748. And what I wanted to point out here is while the local funds increased 32 million, the state funds actually decreased 400,000 overall. So we're actually getting less state funding this year than we even got last year. So, so in summary, the FEFP funding was 455 million, of which the FTE funding for the voucher program is removed. That was 77% of the funding, which brings the FEFP district funding to 425 million. That's a 25 million increase. Now, in part of this increase, there's mandated expenses that increased to the tune of 14 million. And this is based on the growth in the weighted FTE, the TSIA increase of 4.2 million, Safe Schools increase of 718,000, SAI increase of 172,000, and then there was transportation, mental health, and the FRS rate increase. So those mandated expenses that we still had to pick up was 14 million. So out of the 25 million increase, we are left with a increase up for the discretionary funding just down to just an 11 million increase instead. So, so in sum, we've got the base funding. It totaled 299 million. We removed the rolled up categoricals of 27 million, less the voucher program of 30 million, got us to 242 million. We divided that particular 242 million of the discretionary base fund increase by the district's students, sole district students of 50,491, and that's how I arrived at the 4,792 differential pay per student, which last year the BSA was 4,500. So that just shows you that the difference, the differential increase being just 200. So before I go to the next slide, does anybody have any questions?
I have something real quick just to make sure
Yep.
verify. When you talk about the voucher money, is that estimated? Like are we coming up with a number because of last year it was this, so we feel like it's an increase by this, and that's the number we came up with?
No, that's the number that the state comes up with and tells us that they have allocated that there's going to be that many students in this particular program. If money in that program is not used for the voucher program, it doesn't revert back to the district. It actually goes back to the state. They put it in another pot to distribute to other districts that might have a need for that.
But if a child doesn't use the voucher and stays here, and our kids increase, our enrollment increases, we still get the BSA, et cetera.
We would get, but it wouldn't be classified as underneath the voucher. They would do their little calculations and put it in the district's FEFP when it fell out. Yes, as it calculated itself out.
Ms. Saunders?
Yep.
It is a projection. We do look at last year's growth change through the state, and we try to guesstimate if it's going to increase, because it is a pass-through of funding, so we do kind of buffer that line item to capture to the best of our ability. Remember, if they choose not to use the voucher and go to a private school and come to us, we only get the money if they're captured in both FTE or one of the FTE portions.
Right.
So if they're at their private school, when we capture our FTE in October, and then they decide November 1st to come to us, we get no money for them. It will have gone to the private school.
Well, up until the next calculation.
If they're there for the 10-day count, then we'll pick it up for the half remaining of the school year. So it is a moving target. It is a guesstimation target of forecasting, but we've noticed, it's grown every year since they changed over that legislation. We have a little buffer in there so that we can make sure that we're not losing our projected funding based on what could possibly be. So we do allocate a little bit more than what the state forecast is.
Okay.
Mr. Tatum, you have any questions so far?
Yes, please. On slide number 4, I believe it is, the preliminary budget, all funds. This is for the 2023-2024 school year or fiscal year?
Projection for the, yes, 23-24, upcoming.
And so go ahead, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
So the total budget then is in theory, $22,117,038.
It's a little bit higher than that. We put this presentation together kind of like based on our projections back at the end of the closing of April. It's probably slightly a little bit higher than that. Like last year, I think we had 1.3 billion, so it could be eventually going in that direction, but we didn't update this slide for that particular. But you'll be ending up seeing that when we do have the tentative budget that goes for the public hearing. So
The reason I asked is it seems to me the number, and maybe Ms. Saunders could verify this if she remembers, it was like $1.187 billion was the
Yeah, I
signed
think
off,
by the time we finalized it in September, it was about 1.3.
up to 1.
And you know, I'm gonna reference Norm Nelson today, because that was always his difficulty and rightly so, because we'll do a workshop and we're doing it a little early now, just because of the circumstance of change. So we have to capture what we have right now, but that's not our finalized budget that you'll approve, but it's documents that say kind of draft. You'll see another tentative meeting in July where we're closing out. It'll change a little bit. And then in September, you will approve the actual final budget because everything's closed and so forth. And then that's what we work off of. And it changes every month from that point based on the variance of income coming in and expenditures going out. And I think because it's always kind of a moving target, it is confusing for the layperson to say, now, wait a minute, you did a presentation and you said it's 1 billion, but now you're doing one and you're saying it's 1.3 billion. But that is the why. Yes, when you saw it last year, it was a little bit higher, but because they captured this in April, it's a little lower than what it's actually going to be. But they can't, they've got to, when they capture it, they've got to put the numbers that are right then that date certain. So that's why it varies a little bit.
I was just surprised to see the number less than, almost $300 million less than what we what this year's budget actually was.
You're correct. It will change though. You will see, I predict it will be more in line with that or over that. But when you come back in July, it'll probably be a little different, and in September it'll be different.
Because that's the 30%. I mean, if we add $300 million, that's 30%
You're right.
difference.
It's a lot of money.
It's not, a little bit more. It's
You're correct.
all right. And I've heard about inflation. I thought everything was going up, and yet it says here we're going to spend less money.
Yeah, that won't.
Not going to
Another
happen.
thing to add too, so in May, not captured in here, remember we had the cops. So there's a lot of transactions that occurred in the May closing, that will happen in the June closing, that are not pictured here on this presentation today.
So cops would be added to the capital fund then?
Yes.
I'm learning this stuff. Wow.
In a year, you'll be an expert.
Oh, well, I don't know that I'll ever be an expert, but I was pretty proud of myself that I figured that out. I was like, cops, I know what that is. It goes in the capital fund. I get it. All right. All right, I did have another question or two, please, on page 6, please. Charter school capital outlay to be funded by the 1.5 millage revenue on a 5-year gliding scale. How will we calculate, do you know how we're going to calculate that yet? Is it per student, basically? If you've got, take the whole number of students, how many students went over there, divide it, do the math, and send the number, or how will that be
I
calculated?
think what will happen is we will find out what the state has determined, what that dollar amount is, what that 20% is that they're going to be giving to the charter schools, that will come from them. And then we'll be looking to see, does that need to be shored up with the sales tax revenue that we had been providing them, that the board had decided to give to them in lieu of, since they had it. But as part of the recommendation to the board, it did say if funding began, when there was a resolution to go ahead and give the charter schools some of the sales tax money, it was written in there if there had been a decision by the state to give mill money, that would be that would change the agreement. So we'll be looking at that. If for some reason it's shorter than what had been giving in the past, the expectation was to make sure that it was a smooth transition coming out still possibly from the sales tax pot until it got bigger, and then the sales tax could go lower, because that was what the district had decided to give to the charter schools.
Okay. I think we asked for a workshop on that, just to go over that next time. Okay, great. Moving up one line, cost differential. This is basically how the state ensures an equitable financing of school districts across the state. Is that?
This is part of one of the pieces, absolutely, yes.
So in the past, had we been on the backside of that, so to speak, or we had actually, I think I'd heard that we were not at like 1, we were at
.997.
Okay.
37? 0.9937 is what we had been.
Okay.
So, so that's where we had been, and so we didn't get the revenue before though, right? Or were we still always getting that revenue in the previous years?
So we were getting it at the lower rate. Now, because we were below the 1%.
Rolls it up to the 1, that's right.
I'm not quite sure what you said there.
Okay,
but-
so in the past, when we were at .997, we didn't get that extra difference up to 1, but now we will.
Okay. So what is our rating now? Is that the right question to ask? What is it? What is our rating?
9957 is what we are now.
All that means is that if you're above 1, you owe money. If you're below 1, you get money. Would that be a good way of looking at
That
it?
would be a good way to look at it,
Yeah.
right?
Right, if you're below 1, they're gonna take you up to 1.
Okay.
If you're above it, then that's how it will be paid out.
If you're above 1, you kind of owe money back to the state, and they redistribute it to make
No,
it equitable. If you're
what this
below.
number is remember in the finance, because I remember this from the
That's right.
finance.
Yeah, that's what I'm
This is
trying to
from the
understand.
finance workshop that we did or whatever.
Right.
Remember with
Mhm.
FSBA. So this is for like the state. And correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe I am wrong. This is for the counties who don't have as much. That percentage or 0.99 is based on your revenue that you get from the local effort, correct? So like for let's say, I don't know, DeSoto County, right? They're going to be over 1 because they don't get as much as we do from their local effort because they're not as populated. So that's that number.
But if you're below 1, you owe money back to the state, and they distribute that to the ones that are above 1. Is that?
You don't owe any money back to the state.
Okay.
It's just each year it's a distribution of that pot to try to bring some sort of equity there. But you don't get as much if you were below 1. But now they're trying to say, that's gonna be taken out. So if you're below 1, you should get an increase. If you were above 1 last year, your revenue you could be seeing less, but there's not a you owe or we're getting it. They don't take money back.
Okay, you're right, that's the wrong wording. I guess, so the state gets all of our tax money, and then, let's say for ease of thinking purposes, it was $100 million. If you were right at 1, you'd get your $100 million. If you're below 1, you're going to owe some, you're not going to get your $100 million back. You might get 995 or 999.5 million back. If you're above 1 and you put in $100 million, you might get 105 million. So if you're above 1, you're going to get more money than what your property taxes.
It's the Robin Hood effect.
Yes, if you're above 1, your taxes went up to Florida or to the state, and it was $100 million, you get more than $100 million. If you send $100 million and your number is below 1, you get less than $100 million. And then that money is taken from the people below 1 and distributed to the people above 1.
That is correct.
That was
That
the way it
is
was.
what they did.
But now, this year, if you were below 1, they at least took you up to 1.
Well, they took you up to 1.
Yes,
Oh, okay.
they're
Your past
trying
we
to
didn't.
say that should not continue as it has in the past.
Oh, okay, so
That was the change.
that was a change. So if you're below 1, the state said, we're going to reimburse you for being below 1?
We're giving you your fair share.
Your
Whatever
fair
came
share.
in, you get 100% back now.
But the people that are above 1 are still going to get whatever the Robin Hood effect, so to speak?
Well,
or-
80% of all of the government funding is coming in from sales tax.
Okay.
So they may not need to get that distribution off the backs of the other districts.
Okay.
They have other pots of money if they want to give beyond that 1 share.
Okay.
But as it was in the past, they made up that differential from the wealthier districts.
But that's not how they're going to do it anymore.
That is correct.
All right. It's probably all my brain can handle on that, so I think I have a cursory understanding of at least that one. All right, great. If we can move on to page number 7, please. Let's see. Down in the last line, increase in family empowerment scholarships. Actually, I had this question later. You used the term a couple of times.
Voucher program, want to call it that one instead?
Yeah, the voucher program, what was the terminology? I wrote it.
Family empowerment.
Mm-hmm.
Family Empowerment Scholarship is what it's called, FES. I tried to simplify to say voucher. I probably maybe shouldn't have done that. But a lot of people thought of it, considers it the voucher program.
But you mentioned, I wrote this down, I thought, that somehow that's going to affect affect us in some way.
Yes.
Goes to the voucher program. You use that terminology a number of times. What do
Yes,
you mean by that?
so, remember, hidden inside of the funding is money for the district and for the charter schools and for the family empowerment. So I was trying to make sure that when I talked about an increase in a categorical, that you understand this increase, this much is for the district, this much of this increase is for the family empowerment.
And the family empowerment is where a student goes somewhere else other than one of our schools, and the money follows the student. Would that be a good way?
Right, like a private school. If they decide to go to a private school versus the district school, those are the people that are in the family empowerment.
Okay.
And the dollar follow.
All right. Now, does this take into account the new legislation, which apparently widens that aperture for people who use the?
Yes, so that increase for this year is 6.8 million.
Okay, so that's our estimate.
Just this year, that increase, what they were projecting, I believe it's 928 students got added into the district's pot. They're expecting 928 additional students in Manatee County to go into the Family Empowerment Program.
To use that.
Over the number from last year.
Okay, and maybe Ms. Saunders, we had this discussion once. How do they, who calculates that number? It's based on, because you have to track everybody who's homeschooling and even private schools and stuff like that. How do they calculate that number, or do they estimate it?
I think
or?
there's an ELF at the state level.
Yeah, and that's his job. He sits there all day.
Because we do not get a lot of direct answers on how it's being projected or forecast, or so it is getting better over time because they merged McKay Scholarship. They merged a bunch of different voucher scholarship things into this one umbrella.
Right.
We had a McKay, we had a Hope, we had all these things. So now they put it under one. What happens is they do project, they give us an idea of what they think it's going to be, but each FTE period, we do get a roster of students that they say, these students are on a voucher, and their money is not with your district, it's being sent to XYZ location. We are to verify that, because what you do find is some parents did apply for a voucher with the intent to go, so the state is using that number as their money's leaving your district. And we all know that sometimes just because you thought you were going to do that, things change, and you could very well be sitting in one of our schools. So at least that process has been put in place last year. So we can go back and send documents and say, no, they're right here, here's their roster, they've been in the class, here's their grades, we have verification, so that we can pull those dollars back. So there is a process, but there is a person at the state that tells us these kids are going, and it's our job to say, no, they're not.
Because you mentioned to me in a previous conversation that there was something that seemed fundamentally unfair or not right, that somehow the state would take back money from us without really knowing how many kids were in private schools or homeschools or stuff like that. Do you remember?
Well, they were making this projected number, and nobody knew where they were getting the number, nor would we even receive a roster, because it's all coming from them.
Okay.
They pull that money from us and distribute.
Okay.
So we weren't receiving any, how are you getting that number? Where's it going to? How are you coming up with that?
Proof.
So now, right, yeah. So now they do send us a roster each FTE period of these are the monies we're pulling because these are the kids it's going to. And then we have to go in, and our whole department has to look, and it's worth them taking the time, because if they're really sitting in our schools, we need to let them know so that money's not taken and it's allowed to remain here for our students' needs.
So we have a chance to rebut, so
We do now, and that was put in place this past year.
that was just put in place the last year.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And is it actually done by student, like Jane Smith? and
Yeah,
Mark
by
Miller?
student number.
Student
Yes.
number. So every student has a student number.
Correct.
And you can see student number is either at Mona Jane Middle or student number X is over at Braden Christian or something.
Well, we can't see that. That's the other thing. We have no access, for any private schools. The only people that have that information is the state. So if they say that they're at Bradenton Christian School, we have no way to dispute it. The only dispute we can have is that they're not sitting, or they are sitting on our campus. If they say this kid isn't there, they're at this private school, the only way we can dispute it is if we can verify they're actually in ours, and they applied for the scholarship, they said they were going there, but they actually did not show up.
Does that happen? Do you know, is that happening?
Yes.
On a regular basis?
Yes, yes. Twice a year, we're able to, they send us a roster, we're able to look at it.
So student number 1, 2, 3, 4, the state says, hey, they're not in your system. They're at some private school. We don't know where it is, but we do our little database query and we go, no, they're at Mona Middle Jane.
Absolutely.
And we
And
keep-
then we send that to them, and then we're able to receive the money for that.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Great. All right. Thank you for that explanation. And then that was all the questions I had. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Foreman?
Thank you. Today's presentation, you're just covering the money coming in,
Just the revenue side.
and we are not talking about
The expenditures.
the expenditures. And when does that happen?
That will be when we do our public hearing, when we have the tentative millage and budget. We will have those numbers at that point in time.
Great. And then we also get a budget book, which is very detailed.
That's when the budget book occurs.
Oh, that is?
It used to be, we did this workshop in July when that one was coming up, and that's how you guys had your books. So once we get those books put together, we'll definitely get that out to you guys. It should be happening in July. Yep. So anyhow, I mean, July is a busy month. So, but yes, that's the time frame it'll occur.
Okay.
And it's possible next year we might have this workshop then be back in July, but it was a
We want it
good
because
time to
of-
get it now. Yep.
On slide 4, the general fund, $611 million. Do we have a breakdown of what's in that?
The 600,
11,
which one, the general?
yeah, the general, because some of it's the FES, some of it is charter schools, some of it is,
Oh,
I
so
don't even know what all is
this
in it.
particular, the general fund, that would not include voucher.
So we have, so the general fund is made up of the FEFP money that currently, has the voucher being backed out of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not in there, but, yeah, we have a list of the revenue
Yeah.
sources that make up the six.
That would be helpful to have if you could, yeah, because I look at the, your slide number 9, which is absolutely fabulous. And district FEFP funding is $425 million. So I'm questioning what else is in that number. So, okay, thanks. Okay. Okay, slide 7, the family empowerment. I'm gonna start using the right terminology.
Yeah, not the voucher program, that was a bad idea.
Yeah, all right, voucher program.
Change the
Um,
acronym.
Last week, it was announced by the state that they had notified 150,000 students that they were approved for the scholarship. Do we know how much of that is our people? Did they give us that yet? 'Cause-
They will.
Okay, but we don't have it yet.
No, we don't have it yet. Everybody shifts at the 10-day count.
Yeah,
And then when we do that FTE count in October, is when the state will give the first allocation of money for this next year. They gave a projection back from the spring, summertime. And then they'll adjust the money again based on that October, which we get around December. It used to come December. Now it really comes in January. So that adjustment of that list of students will be verified somewhere around that October FTE count. And then it will be our job to dispute any that they say are our students at the private schools, and that adjustment will happen then. They won't give us a roster until that time.
Or even a grand total of, X number of students, okay. On slide 7, your first bullet point, increase BSA per student from 4587 to 5139. Do we have you may have stated it, in fact, I would love a transcript of your whole presentation, because you had such good stuff in there. But the BSA, do we have what that number is net of the categoricals that we had last year? In other words, they're claiming that they have increased BSA, but.
So the BSA last year was the 4587.
Right.
This year, they say the BSA 5139. Out of that breakdown, hold on.
She has it.
So it was like
I have it. Hold on.
She's got it.
Hold on. Okay, so out of that, so we had, let me first go to first I'll talk about the FTE. It was 53,767. The FES FTE was 3,274, which brought us to 50,491. I'm going to keep the charter school in there, but the charter school for next year is like 9,652. But so when we divided what we had in the base funding after we had taken out the rolled up categoricals and the vouchers was 242 million, divided it by the 50,000, that's how we got 4,792. And that's really your discretionary funding per student.
Your increase in BSA, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I was playing with some numbers, and I was using the FTE, and running through it, so I've got some different numbers.
Yeah,
But I think the concept is still the same, and that is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm looking at now I'm on to slide 9. All right, bottom, total state funding, the very bottom, last, on the left.
Right.
That's a decrease of $395,000. Is that
Yes.
correct? Okay.
Remember, so the
But-
state funding decreased.
Yes,
The
it did.
local
It,
helped us.
it did, and but that also, it's not even 395, right? It's plus the 6.7 million. The state discretionary supplement, is that?
Well, that's true. Inside of that total state funding at that point is still the FES, still sitting in that.
It's still sitting in that, so you back that out, we are
That's
looking at,
true.
and I'm not talking charter schools, because that's in the FES too, right?
Right, that's in the FES too.
Yeah, so if, just the voucher schools, we're talking about roughly $7 million less in state funding this year. Would you say that's
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
okay?
Because if you look at the box on that 5th row over to the right-hand side that says state-funded discretionary supplement, that's pretty much the 7 million, and that's not the districts.
Yeah.
So they say total state funding, but they don't say districts' total state
Yeah,
funding.
they're including the retired local effort, yeah, I just,
Yes.
using, like I said, I did FTE students, but I was looking at that, per student funding increased from $7,074 roughly to $7,303, but it was financed, the increase was financed entirely, not a little bit, but entirely by local property taxes. Is that correct?
Local efforts, absolutely.
So the state is giving us less, and our Manatee County property owners are having to pitch in more this year. And that's where this increase came from,
Right.
okay?
That's where you,
And I do, and I want to emphasize that because recently I spoke with one of our legislators and he goes, hey, we got you some money. We got you more money. And I went through this and I'm going, nope, you sure didn't.
Yeah, when you just see it broken
But
out.
they're being told, and the public's being told that we're getting more money from the state. And it's not true. We're getting more money from our local residents. And
If there was no vouchers in charter schools, if that money didn't go there, theoretically, we would have more money.
Well, they took the categoricals and put them into the funding formula
right.
that made it look as if it.
But we
went
still have to
up,
fund them.
But you still
Like
do,
those
right.
categoricals.
It's not really giving you discretionary spend, because you still have to spend that in that manner, because you still are obligated to do those things. So, I think on one hand, can they say they gave more spending? Yes, they can. But the way that you can actually prove, did you get an increase from the state, you have to do the calculation like Ms. Foreman and Ms. Sellers is stating. You've got to do apples to apples on the pure. And when you do it that way, it did not increase our discretionary spending.
it didn't just increase our per-student funding.
Correct.
I mean, we're not talking discretionary, we're talking
Right.
what it takes to run this district, what it takes to educate
Correct.
our students. And we need to pound that home, because people are buying into this, going, oh, things are great, we're getting more money. And, I'm just totally disgusted, with the funny math is what they're getting. Okay. Now, without the millage, our 1 mil, okay, I looked at, the calculation I did was if you take the district FEFP funding, okay, this is after, well, maybe this isn't fair because that's after pulling out the charter school money. But out of that 425, $66 million is coming from the referendum, from the millage. And if I divide that by the weighted FTEs, I'm coming up with a number, and actually I would love it if you would fix this number, but what is the per student amount without the millage per FTE?
Without the 1.5 mil?
No, without the 1.0.
With what, 1.0?
Actually, it may be a simpler calculation than I think. It may be just take the 66 million and divide it by the number of students. Would that be correct? But that would have to include the charter school students, so it would be the FTE students of 53. Yeah.
So I got the F.
Fix it for me. Calculate that.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
do share them.
Yeah,
with-
because I think that we also need to calculate every year, as this, if we didn't have, the number I came up with is a little over 6,000, but if we didn't have the 1 mil, we'd have $1,000 less per student to teach them, so.
We can get that to you.
You're right, it's $13.20. You were right about $1,000 less.
Yeah,
A little more than $1,000. What you
yeah, all right, yeah. So we can't be without it, I hate to say that. So, okay, and that's it for what you've done so far. I just have one question on the rest of the slides, but
Okay.
I'll wait.
Oh yeah, she hasn't gone further. Anything, Ms. Bray? on
Just,
what she's already-
just one here on class size reduction. You're saying it went from 51 to 49.
Correct.
Okay, first of all, again, educational thing. Class size reduction, explain what that is.
So that's used for general instruction.
Okay.
That's the particular category that's used in. And it's based on the October enrollment that's not 10-day count, that is.
No, the first survey too in October is the one that they go on. And remember, the class size amendment and legislation is 1 to 18 for K to 3, 4 through 8th grade, 1 to 22, and then second high school core courses are 1 to 25. So when that legislation went into play, the state gives additional dollars to ensure that you're meeting the class size amendment. Failure to do so generally results in a penalty. We're usually pretty good about it anyway here, per that one class or so forth. That's not across the board. But this year, remember, because they know that there is a shortage of teachers, there will not be a penalty if a class cannot, or a district or what have you, cannot meet if they exceed that ratio. So they did give extra money when that went into effect, because they know if that is the requirement, you have to have more teachers to fulfill that. Because in years past, there used to be maybe 1 to 30 kids in a class. So they tried to help offset that additional personnel that's needed to adhere to that legislation.
Okay, because in 2023, fourth calculation was 51, and now we're looking at 2024, it's 49. So it actually went down, but based on projections, we're going to have 1,200 more students.
That is correct.
So that number, we will get more money
Yes.
once we
Yes.
say, no, our students are this count, not this count. Is that correct? Am I?
Well, they will adjust it when they do that survey in October.
Okay.
If we exceeded and we grew more than what they had forecasted, then they will adjust that up or down
Okay,
in our disbursement in mid-year through the school year.
like in January?
Like in
you said in
So but they never give you the same funding that you do from the beginning. They prorate it. So if you were gonna get 4,000 per student out of the gate, and you exceeded that and you needed more because you grew more than what you thought, you're never gonna get that whole. They have to look at the whole state to see if the whole state went up, and then they adjust that number. But you will get more money, but it's never the same as your original forecast.
Okay, I see what you're saying. So you forecasted 55,000, and we tell them we have 57,000. But in January, they're gonna prorate it down because half the year's over.
Correct.
Am I correct in that
Well,
analogy?
Half the year's over, but it's because in many cases, other districts grew too.
Right.
So they have one pot of money and they say, we can't afford to give you 4,000 because there's too many additional students that no one forecasted, we didn't budget for. We'll give everybody 3,500 per kid for that extra. It just depends. Now, if some districts lost equal to what was gained, it's a wash. But what we've seen in recent years, it's less money because everybody's growing.
Out of state is coming in instead.
Right,
everybody's
right,
growing.
and that's right, it isn't from county to county.
Right.
It's,
From
Other
other
states
countries and
coming
other
in,
states.
other areas,
So
okay.
that's why it's so important that you're pretty good at your guess, because it's a guess. You make it in January of what you think the growth is going to be, because that's your best bet of getting the maximum funding for the year.
have we ever been told, oh, I don't think you're gonna have 1,200 more students?
Yes.
Okay, I was just, okay, I'm not surprised by that, to be
There was
honest with
2
you.
years ago, we had to pay them back.
Okay,
Be-
because
not-
that's what I was
We
thinking.
had more students, but we still had to pay them back because of the calculation.
Because of the
Yeah, we had more
calculations.
students. I mean, we're pretty good on our forecasting, but it's all crazy. I mean, it's a bizarre formula. You have to admit,
Yeah,
It's a,
it is.
Beyond the-
it's a
It's beyond
very
bizarre.
unusual way to build a budget.
You can say that now because it's your last day.
I know.
It's very bizarre. I mean,
Speak your mind.
yeah, if you got the student in your, you know,
Crazy.
okay, and then, you said the net, in the next box over, net state FEFP, that number went down as well, right? I'm looking at box,
Oh, and the orange in the middle.
yep, right in the middle. I got a big highlight around it. Wow, that went down quite a bit. And you're saying, so we're taking the gross state funding minus the RLE, and that's where that number comes from, am I correct? And looking at your
Yep,
chart?
the minuses and pluses, yes.
Yeah, okay, okay, so we actually went down from last year? In that one, okay, we went down, all
That's
right.
what Ms. Foreman was basically talking about.
Yeah,
'Cause
exactly.
In that green box right before that one, that's where you see the local revenue having that increase to give us then the state,
Okay. I don't either, I have no idea what that was.
so.
Okay, so for the sake of time, I just want to, you're right, it is a shell game. They took it from one category, threw it into a big bucket and spread it out a little differently, from what I can read, and I have this printed at home even. So, and I'm still confused, as you can tell. But it's a lot to learn, but I see where, yeah, on the vouchers, throw that in there, and then it's like, wow. Okay, those were the two questions that I had, looking at the two things that was a big reduction. So thank
And
you.
it's always been a pendulum game. It's always been a,
It is.
we're gonna decrease from state if your local goes up, and so everyone thinks that, oh, all these houses, you're gonna have more tax base. Well, no, because you get less.
They will.
If we'd have always stayed at the state level and that never went down, I'd agree with you, right? Our tax, but it's always a pendulum game.
And that's what I tell people when they, right, and that's what I explain to people when they say, well, look at my tax bill, and I'm like, but your taxes don't go directly to us, your taxes go to the state, and then they give us what they think we need. So that's the best explanation I can give to people in almost layman terms, just. And I wasn't real sure about that until I got more involved, and I'm like, no, it goes all in one bucket, and we get to share it. So,
Pass it down to the districts, each county.
each county, right?
Mrs. Messenger, anything to add?
Not much. Mrs. Foreman and everything she said, I love all of it. I agree with you. And unfortunately, I think this has been happening for years, and what's put out is not representative of what's really happening in our public schools. And it's unfortunate that it's communicated in that way. And I do agree with you. I think unless you are a member of the legislature that really understands this, you're probably not understanding what's really happening to public education, because your focus might be something totally different, or your expertise might be something totally different. So I'm not faulting them, but they believe they are doing something that is not what's really happening, and that's been going on for years. So anytime we can educate and communicate, I think that there's benefit to that.
I'm writing a letter.
Okay.
I'm serious.
No, so I just really appreciate everything you said, and feel like I've been saying it for years. I think the more it can get out there, the more it can get to more people. I think that's important, because I don't think there's a deep understanding, and there's very few in the legislature that really have that deep understanding, because they have an expertise in something else. My only real question is about the teacher classroom supplies. As a teacher, obviously I got that, and I've seen it come in a lot of different forms, either a check or in your paycheck or in a gift card, or, I've seen it come in a lot of different ways. And I don't think this district ever did like a gift card or anything like that. You guys always like issued a check, or I don't know if it was reimbursement, but issued a check or put it in the paycheck.
They put it, I believe, into,
The separate.
It's a separate check, but it was a check. It wasn't like, here's your money
We
card.
have,
I
we
hate
have
that.
done,
Okay.
we have done the cards before, but, yeah,
I never liked that. Anyways,
no.
it's,
One time,
and then you probably had pitchforks from all the teachers because that's some shenanigans,
but it's a separate check defined by the state of who a teacher is.
which is also fun too. That's a fun thing.
300 per,
Right, which I spent
They said they're
750 in my classroom, and that was 8 years ago, so I'm sure it's even more than that. But it's never enough. But my point is, it got removed from a categorical. We are still required to disperse that to all the teachers, correct? That's all I wanted to hear. Thank you.
That was it?
That was it?
I have one more question.
Yeah.
I want to try to make sure I understand what Mrs. Foreman was talking about. So if you go to the last box on page 9, the 2024 conference report, and I guess that term means the 2024 conference report, is the calculation by the government,
from state, yes.
as opposed to the 2023 fourth quarter calculation, which was done actual
Or
versus,
during this particular school year.
okay,
So we can consider, that's why we consider that one our 2023. And the
Okay.
2024 conference report is pretty much the
project.
estimated for the coming up year, right?
Okay, so then from 2023 to 2024, we went up about $25 million.
$25 million.
And the point Mrs. Foreman is making is that it's really not more money from what we might call state revenue, taxes that were collected by the state. It's just that our property taxes that we sent to the state were higher because property values went up. And so we got more, we're getting more money to the tune of $25 million, but it's not because we got more state revenue. It's because we just basically sent more money from the county up to the state, and then the state sent back more money that we sent to them originally. Is that?
More funding for
No,
the,
that's
from the
not-
local effort.
Okay.
It's not because property values went up or even that we have more property,
Okay.
okay? It's because they decreased their share, and even if your property values had stayed the same, you're going to pay more taxes next year
Okay.
because of the required local effort. They're requiring us to charge that.
Okay.
And that is a bigger piece of the pie than it usually is. Actually, last year, property taxes, dollars, because of Save Our Homes, it actually, I think it was about a 3%. Save Our Homes capture increase of value to 3%. And the required local effort went up 3-point-some odd percent. So actually, you had a little bit of a reduction. Am I remembering that right? The dollar values.
I think you are right, Ms. Foreman. The issue is the state sets what we can tax, which is what you will have in July. They roll it back to make sure that you're not seeing an increase. The issue is, so if you looked at the actual tax, it was reduced. However, if homes have appreciated and you have more homes as well, you end up collecting more revenue, but it's not because the tax was raised.
Right.
If they left our tax rate alone and didn't roll it back, in the last 5 years, it equated to the 1 mil extra that we've levied. So if they didn't fluctuate what our tax is, we wouldn't need to do anything additional because the growth and the appreciation of the values would take care of our own community. But the state sets our tax rate.
So that up on the next to last line on chart on page 9, where it says local required effort, it has a 2023 to 2024, it says 3.244. And then below it, it says 3.274. Is that the rollback that you're talking about, or?
Yeah, they will, I don't think they've given us what this next year, millage rate will be set yet. So you'll get a new one each year. But yes,
And that's a state statute. The legislature passes it and says, you, the county, will levy this.
yes.
Yeah.
If you want to receive any other funding, you have to levy what they give you.
Right. And I brought this point up at the finance conference. We could actually not do it, but we have to do it. But
You have
we could
to.
not do it, but we have. But it seems to be, at least on this chart, it shows a small decrease from 3.274 to 3.244. And is that this rollback that you're talking about? It just keeps going back and back every year, which means that the millage that is. But I thought I said that it was due to more property tax, more value on the property, and that's where we get the extra increase. But then Ms. Foreman says, no, that's really not where it comes from. But
That's where the state gets it.
Well, it doesn't.
We do get more, but it's in calculating per student.
Not from the value of the taxes that got paid up to the state. They then take it and do their little calculation, and then we get it back inside with this BSA,
okay,
I need to work up
I think.
an example, but,
I guess it just seems to me the value of the total property base value goes up. It's taxed at 3.244 mils. That money goes up to the state, and then we get it back. And it's more money than we got last year because the property value base is higher, but we're just getting more of our own money back. It's not like the state is sending us more money. We're just getting more of our own money back. That's
Why putting it out in that box, the lower left-hand box for the total state funding, and that's where you can then see it if you want to pull out that local piece, so you can see exactly what the state gave.
Okay.
And remember the 25 million that did increase, that there are still mandated expenses that we have to pay out of that 25 increase. Remember there was the FRS rate that increased. You had the mental health increase, safe schools, SAI, transportation, for the teachers and for the growth in the FTE. So the calculations of each of those we had worked up was about 14 million. So then that left you with the 11 million that didn't have to, but you're still going to have to. You still have to pay for those other expenses that wasn't captured in the mandated items I just mentioned. But we've already talked about the different costs that the district will have to supplement for all of those different categories that we don't get enough allocation from the state for.
Well, thanks for that explanation. I mean, it's very detailed, but this is something I think we need to understand as school board members, is because people will come to us and say, well, look at all that extra money you got from the state. And if it's not necessarily true, then we need to be able to, and somewhat of it.
Hopefully it helped out.
Yeah, and basically saying, well, we just sent more money to the state and they just sent it back to us, but the state itself didn't give us necessarily any more money, so.
Right.
Okay, great. Thanks for indulging that conversation. I appreciate it.
Yes. Does anybody have questions? I still have a little bit more to go.
Yeah, no, we're good. Move on.
Okay. All right. So the taxable value, and we almost were already touching on it. While the conference report had given us what our taxable value was and calculating it out, we did receive the new estimated taxable value from the tax collectors on May 25th, and it did raise to 72 million. So that will then be in our with the state, and we'll still feed that back. So even though we had put it together, we wanted to remind everyone, so these are the pots or parts that the particular taxable value comes from. Your required local effort, your discretionary operating was the 0.748. You still have the capital outlay mill of 1.5 and the additional voted operating of 1 mil, which we will get back with you, Ms. Foreman, on what that looks like, that BSA without the 1 point mil. Okay.
That's the 72 million. I'm sorry to interrupt, but that's the number on here you're saying is not correct, 68,896,000.
Yeah, so the state, when they had done the 23-24 conference report, we had the taxable value of 68 million, but since then, billion, and then, but then starting in May, we got even a better calculation.
On the bottom, you have it.
The actual
yeah, you have it listed down at the bottom.
Right. So we didn't put that in a particular calculation. We have always usually done it where we compared it to last year's fourth quarter to the conference report, but since we had that information, we did want to put that in.
Great.
So that would lead to an increase in all of those.
Thank
Okay, so want to remind everyone of some of the assumptions that we are making with the general fund. We mentioned this at the staffing plan workshop. So there was an increase in the classroom teachers of 6.8 million. And we also moved those counselors and the classroom subs from the ESSER back into the general fund, which was 5.4 million. And then there was still the FRS that increased and the health insurance rate increase. And here is a summary of the history of the general fund. I wanted to point out that at the preparation of this particular slide, the 22-23 was estimated at 11%, and the projection for 23-24 would be about almost 7%. And also just to remind you guys the requirements with the general fund balance. The districts needs to operate obviously with a balanced budget, and the district had a policy to recognize adequate funding in the fund balance for any necessary unforeseen events. So the district policy was to maintain a general fund reserve ending fund balance not classified as restricted, committed, or non-spendable of 5% of the general fund revenues, not less than 3%. The state requires the 3% reserve, and the district added an additional 2% to ensure that contingencies for fiscal shortfalls were captured. So that's how we get the 5%. And that is all I have for my presentation.
So is our board policy a range, or is it actually at 5%?
5%.
It is.
5%.
So
Yeah, and in the previous slide, I had given what we're projecting.
7.
Yeah. Right.
great. Thank you.
Welcome.
Any questions on those last couple things, Ms. Foreman?
Yeah, I do. Our policy, I know I brought it up once before, but our policy says that our reserve is up to 5%, and we have exceeded 5% for a number of years. Is our Auditor General going to come in and ding us for that?
No, the only one that they'll ding you for is if you go below what the state has required, which is 3%.
Okay, now, I want to address to my fellow board members. If we have a max of 5%, we are exceeding it, and I'm going to say that's a good thing, because I think, as you all probably saw in your FSBA finance course, if you compare our fund balance percentage to other districts, we're actually not that high, because other districts, and including us, knew that the ESSER cliff is coming, and started stocking money away for that.
Right.
And which was good fiscal stewardship. It concerns me that we restrict it, according to our policy, to 5%. And I personally would love to see us change our policy to instead of a 3% minimum, which is what's required by state law, but change that to 5% and no less than 5%.
I thought that's what it is.
No, it's no less than 3%.
It says up to.
Yeah.
I know.
The board shall maintain a general fund
Yeah,
reserve.
I thought our board policy had to be 5.
The
Up
board,
to 5.
the board shall, I've got it here. The board shall maintain a general fund reserve of ending fund balance not classified as restricted, because we gotta look at unrestricted, committed or non-spendable of up to 5% of recurring general fund revenues, but no less than 3%. The additional 2% will be assigned by the board as a contingency fund to be used only for fiscal shortfalls. I think we need to workshop
Update the policy.
that policy.
Update the
Really do.
policy, that's all we need to do is.
Well, we've got to come to an
Yeah.
agreement what it
Yes,
is.
Yeah.
And
And
let
we
me
also
interject
don't want-
one thing too. So if we have a board policy that does require us to do something higher than, you know how you say up to 5%? If you say you want it to be at 5% and you're not to go below that, then an auditor who's doing a performance, whomever that audit group might be, they could actually give you a finding on not following your board policy. At least the way this is written at this point, is your finding at this point would be state statute of 3% is where because the state statute is the lower one.
The minimum, right.
Right, so you would have a finding if you went below the 3% state statute. But the way that the district has it written right now, up to 5% for the general funds, it,
We don't follow our policy there.
oh, yeah.
That's
I
what
want to have a workshop on that.
we do need to workshop that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm kinda, yeah.
I mean, we don't want to be in the business of accumulating and socking away money, okay?
We have a
Unless-
cliff.
Unless
cliff.
we see something coming, like an
Well-
ESSER cliff, which is what we did. And should we be maintaining an 11% reserve going forward after 2024? Probably not, but,
Well,
we
remember,
need
it's
to figure out
expected
what
to
you
be
want.
7% next year.
right, right.
This is the general fund right now. If we, for some reason, need to, as we see the year end, if another fund does require a transfer,
Yeah.
per se, for like, if the health insurance needed a type of transfer,
That's what I was
that would change what we happen to be seeing at right now. So this picture, again, when we assembled this, was, yeah.
Prior
so
to, right.
Just
Back-
a reminder.
But I do think we need to have a discussion about that policy and what we would like to, how we would like to operate going forward.
I have a
Good point.
question there
Yeah.
too.
Good point.
How would we, because our policy says basically between 3% and 5%, if a taxpayer came to us and said, you've got an 11.71% reserve, you're not following your policy, you're taxing us too much, how would we answer that? And we, you know.
A quick, easy answer right now is because of the ESSER monies
Okay,
are gonna go away. And we have things that we still need to maintain. So that's what's gonna, am I correct in assuming that, Ms.
Well,
Foreman?
yeah, that's why we had such a.
Right,
an increase.
we're gonna have a huge dip
Well, we
in,
got
in federal funding, so
But
this
some of
is
those
gonna,
expenses are not gonna go away because we are still dealing with some of the
aftermath, the aftermath.
Do we have a, sorry to interrupt.
just real quick, how much is the ESSER, it was $100 million over 4 years or something like that?
Well, it was multiple different pots, but with all, when you add them all, close to 100 million.
And it was
You-
like
you-
25 million a year or something, is that?
Well, no, they give you the whole lump sum, but you have up to fall of 24 to spend it.
It was 4 fiscal years to spend it or something?
You still have personnel expenses in this coming budget of give or take 6 million. So you will see another dip. You saw one this year. We had about 13 million. We did half of it this year. We will do the other half next year. So it wouldn't be one big wave for the new person coming in to have to shore up $13 million. So you will probably see a decline of your fund balance next year because of that additional, decline of ESSER going back into the general fund. So, but it's good so that everybody knows, and it was given to spend and to make a difference, at post-COVID. But it will be a tight year next year.
So when we say it's a cliff, It was about, so what I heard you say maybe is about $26 million, 13 million this year, 13 million next year.
A total of 13 we still had embedded in personnel. We took half this year.
Right.
So, I say half, it was almost 6 million. You'll have another 6 million that will come out of what's being funded in ESSER for people and be placed back into the general fund next year.
Okay. Because people are gonna, I'm trying to understand this because people are gonna, certain people I know are probably gonna ask me questions, and I need to understand these numbers, and so why are we at 11.71%? Because of ESSER money? Is that?
That is correct. You're
Okay.
ending, the year, this year, with 11.72 projected. It'll fluctuate when they close, but close. But as you see, the projection for next year is below 7.
Right.
And it is the people that we added to the staffing plan that were being paid for out of ESSER that we've now put into the general fund, where we're paying out of the general fund.
Are there some positions, though, that are going away because they're?
Yes, we did eliminate some, but we carried some over. And next year, decisions will need to be made based on how much money there is for the budget. The remaining, how many do we keep and roll back into the general budget next year? And some will probably be reduced because we added many positions because we had that extra money. That extra money will be gone.
How much annually is the ESSER approximately? How much is that put into the general fund on an annual basis?
Well, this year it was,
Hard to estimate or calculate.
Remember, you
or-
get it for the whole 4 years, so.
Okay, so you just have been spreading it out over.
Right.
yes.
we
Yeah,
just-
over-
The expenses
drawing it.
have it's been spread out over the time, the duration of the grant.
Okay. Because, yes, I think we have to come up with some policy that, I agree with you, that to workshop this so that we
Yeah.
can say we are following the policy, because people will say, gee, you said you only got, your policy is 3 to 5%, you've got more than 100% of what you say your reserves are. And even next year, if we're saying 7%, we're still 2% above what the policy says. I'm not against having more reserves, I just would like us to have a policy that aligns with what we're doing.
But
That's
I
all.
do think if you look at the history of our fund balance, you will not see that we have been exceeding the policy very frequently.
Right.
If you look real far, you'll see we were broke.
Go to
All
it.
that.
So don't go that far.
11
So,
no.
yeah.
Well, it's ever since COVID, and when we got the flush.
Yeah,
of
in
cash.
2021, ever since the pandemic, you can tell in 2021,
Yeah, you
when we
can see
started
that.
getting the ESSER, that's when you started to see it climb, and then as you see it get ready to go
So,
away.
If I were speaking to someone asking and seeing the fund balance, that increase is directly tied to the grant monies we receive for COVID
Okay,
and the ESSER funding,
and that money will be going away, and so we have to be
September of '24,
fiscally
Yeah.
responsible.
You look at
and-
1920,
Yeah,
correct.
So it's possible, the way, if you were looking at it and from the past history, the point was just to make sure that it stayed away from the 3%. And if you notice in 10, 11 through
right.
right,
12, 13 was when we had that very difficult time,
fortunate time.
yeah.
But just have a policy that says, why don't we just say, we could say something like a minimum of 5%, and if it goes above it, it goes above, and then we're in compliance with the policy, but we can workshop
This,
that.
this all goes back to, raising the reserve policy number. I mean, we all had the meetings where we have difficult things that happen that we need to move money from one bucket to another because of some catastrophic things. So I'm for at least have something there, and to move monies around like that. I mean, I would rather have a higher reserve than I would back in, what it was at 2012, 13. I mean, if you look at a history of that, but if you look at the 2019-20 reserve was only 3.84. So that's when the influx started, right after that, of the funding, right?
Like I said, I'm not against it,
But yeah, workshop
top of
it
my
and
head,
bring it up.
5% minimum, I'm with you, we should have some reserve, I'm just saying our policy should align with what we're actually doing. and-
We could increase it up to, or whatever.
Or a minimum of 5% or something like that.
Ms. Messenger?
Yeah, that's, yeah.
Sorry, I just want to point out that the reason that number went down is because of COVID.
Right, right.
Right,
I know.
like that was the importance of having that fund balance at 5%. That was always the goal because we knew, hey, if something hit, we'd be able to cover it in those shortfalls in the short term, which that's what that shows you is if we had been at 3, which is the state mandate, we would have been in trouble, which was the whole point of this policy was you need to have a little extra cushion. You don't need a huge extra cushion. I actually think 5 is appropriate, and it shows that it's appropriate because here we had a pandemic and we went down, but we didn't go down below the state threshold. And then we did get additional funding after that, and you can see it. But that's why I think the 5 is appropriate, and we can play with the wording however we want and pretend we're all lawyers because that's what that's going to be is shall, may, whatever. But
Mr. Dye will be doing that.
But yeah, but my point is, we were at that 5, and that is the purpose that the board put that policy in place was to ensure that, and that wasn't the first time that happened. Majorie Stoneman Douglas, when that happened, that was another budget hit to us where we had to then pay for all the SROs and guardians, and that was before the state funded it. So once again, it's that extra cushion that has saved us several times, and I think that I just want to make sure that's that clear that that's why that went down then, and that's the purpose of having the 5%. But you can see even those times when it happened, that 5% was enough to hold us.
Yes.
And support us. So, we don't want to hoard the money. We want to make sure it's going to our classrooms and to our teachers and to our employees. So I just wanted to make sure I put that together. Thank you.
Yep,
You're welcome.
you're welcome.
We tend to have a workshop about this. We tend to have a workshop about things we want to workshop in the workshop we're talking about.
This is what I'm saying.
Workshop. There's a little workshop,
Say
wasn't
that
it?
again?
It's just a
Any other
policy.
questions for Ms. Sellers?
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much, your whole team.
Thank
I know
you.
this is not easy.
I would
know this,
add that we probably need to change our acronym list again. Oh my gosh.
I know it's not easy in normal circumstances, but then when you get legislation changes and acronym changes, and
Yeah.
I know it's not easy.
Crazy.
So we
I'm
really,
trying to
really
match
appreciate
the acronym from here to here all the time.
You should have seen her panic attacks at the,
Don't tell on me.
it. I'm sure.
I just want to say one more thing. I really appreciated how you did the presentation so early and sent us it in advance. And that was, I think, very beneficial to us. So I really appreciated that. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, awesome. As we end, just want to remind everybody, Monday, 10 o'clock, swearing in of
Yeah,
Mr. Wysong.
red, white, and blue.
It'll be a quick one. It'll be swearing in, and that's the only thing on the agenda. But that is coming Monday. Ms. Saunders, thank you very much. You've got approximately, 5 hours left. Who's counting?
Let's go.
And I know we did.
Groundbreaking.
I know we did our goodbyes, but thank you very much. And yes, you get one last groundbreaking. We'll hopefully see everybody at 2 o'clock on the tarmac. We are adjourned.